The ranger told me if I saw trail markers that weren't on my map, I should turn around immediately. I should have listened, because by the time I realized the cairns were appearing behind me faster than I was walking forward, I was already 5 miles off any official trail. My name's Jake. I'm 29 years old, work remote in tech, and I've been hiking solo for about 6 years now. I'm not reckless. I carry paper maps, a compass, bear spray, 2 headlamps, and I always file my route with the ranger station before heading out. That's exactly what I did on October 15th, 2024, when I pulled into the Needles district of Canyonlands National Park around 2 p.m. The ranger at the desk was an older guy, maybe late 50s, with sun-weathered skin and the kind of quiet intensity you only get from spending decades in the backcountry. When I handed him my permit for the overnight loop, he held it a little longer than necessary. "You're going solo?" he asked. "Always do," I said. He nodded slowly, studying the route I'd marked. "Stay on the marked trail. If you see cairns that aren't on your map, don't follow them. Turn around and come back the way you came." It was oddly specific advice. Most rangers just remind you about water and weather. "Sure," I said. "Is there trail maintenance going on or something?" "Just stay on the marked trail," he repeated, then stamped my permit and slid it back across the counter. I should have asked more questions, but the afternoon light was burning away, and I wanted to make it to my planned campsite before dark. So I loaded up my pack, checked my boots, and started down the Chesler Park Trail around 2:30 p.m. The first hour was perfect. Clear blue October sky, temperature in the low 60s, that crisp desert air that smells like juniper and red dust. The trail wound through sandstone formations, those iconic Canyonlands needles rising up like stone fingers on both sides of the path. I passed a couple coming back from a day hike, exchanged nods, and kept moving. By 4 p.m. I was deep into the loop, miles from the trailhead, with nothing but sagebrush, rock, and silence. The kind of silence that makes you aware of your own breathing. I stopped to take a drink from my hydration pack and checked the map. According to my route, I should hit the junction for the campsite spur trail in another 1.5 miles. That's when I noticed the cairn. It was just off the trail to my right, maybe 20 feet away, a stack of flat sandstone rocks, about 3 feet tall, balanced in that deliberate way that marks a trail. But when I looked at my map, there was no junction here, no reason for a marker. I remembered what the ranger said. Don't follow cairns that aren't on your map. I kept walking. Another 10 minutes down the trail, I saw another one, this time on my left, closer to the path. Same style, same height. I stopped and pulled out my map again, tracing the trail with my finger. Nothing. No marked junction, no alternate route. Just the main loop continuing south toward the campsite. The sun was lower now, maybe an hour from setting, and the temperature was starting to drop. I could feel it in the air, that desert cold that comes on fast once the light starts dying. I pulled on my fleece layer and kept moving, eyes on the trail ahead. That's when I saw the third cairn. This one was directly on the trail, impossible to miss. And here's what bothered me. I had been watching the path. I hadn't looked away, but I didn't see anyone build it. It was just suddenly there, like it had always been there. I walked up to it slowly. The rocks were the same red sandstone as everything else in the canyon. No markings, no paint, nothing unusual, except the top rock was warm, not sun-warm. The sun was on the other side of the canyon now, and this cairn was in full shade, but the top rock was warm like someone had just been holding it. I pulled my hand back and looked around. The trail stretched ahead of me, empty. Behind me, empty. Nothing but sandstone formations and scrub brush. No movement. No sound except the wind moving through the junipers. I checked my map one more time. The junction for my campsite was still a mile ahead. This cairn wasn't on the map. I needed to turn around. But turning around meant hiking back past 2 more of those cairns. and something about that idea made my stomach tight. Instead, I decided to stay on the main trail, ignore any markers that weren't on the map, and push forward to the campsite. Once I was there, I'd have my tent, my sleeping bag, the familiar routine of setting up camp. Everything would feel normal again. I stepped around the cairn and kept walking. The light was fading fast now, that quick October dusk where you've got maybe 30 minutes between golden hour and full dark. I picked up my pace, boots crunching on the sandy trail. My plan was solid. Another 45 minutes of hiking. I'd hit the spur trail to the campsite, set up before dark, build a small fire, eat dinner, sleep, and hike out in the morning. Then I heard the voice. Jake. It came from somewhere behind me, distant but clear. A man's voice. Familiar. I stopped and turned around. The trail behind me was empty. "Hello?" I called out. Nothing. Just wind. Just silence. I waited another few seconds, then kept walking. Probably just the wind moving through the rock formations. Sound does weird things in canyons. Jake. Over here. This time it was closer, and I recognized it. It sounded exactly like my friend Tyler. Same cadence, same tone, but Tyler was in Denver. Tyler wasn't on this hike. "Tyler?" I called out, my voice sounding small against the rock walls. "Over here. I need help." The voice was coming from off-trail, somewhere to my left where the sandstone formations created a maze of narrow passages. My heart was pounding now, because the voice sounded exactly right, but something about it was wrong. Like there was a tiny delay between the words, or an echo that shouldn't be there. I pulled out my phone. No signal. I knew there wouldn't be, but I checked anyway. "Jake, please." Every instinct told me not to go toward that voice. But what if someone was hurt? What if another hiker was in trouble and just happened to sound like Tyler? I stepped off the trail. The ground between the sandstone formations was loose and rocky. I had to watch my footing, moving slowly between the narrow stone walls. The temperature dropped immediately in the shade, and I could feel the cold radiating off the rock. "Where are you?" I called out. "Here, keep coming." The voice was leading me deeper into the maze. The stone walls pressed in on both sides, maybe 3 feet apart in places. I had to turn sideways to squeeze through some sections, and that's when I realized I couldn't see the main trail anymore. I stopped and tried to orient myself. I had only walked maybe 50 yards off the path. I should be able to see it. But when I turned around, all I saw were more rock walls, more passages, all looking identical. "Jake." The voice was ahead of me now. I pushed forward through a narrow gap and emerged into a small clearing, maybe 20 feet across, surrounded by sandstone walls. In the center was a campsite. Not my campsite. Someone else's. A tent was set up, a small fire ring made of stones, a backpack leaning against a rock. But here's what made my skin crawl. The tent was open, flapping in the wind. The fire ring had fresh coals, still glowing faintly orange. The backpack looked expensive, new, but there was no one here. "Hello?" I called out. The wind picked up, and I heard that voice again, but this time it was different. It was still Tyler's voice, but the words were wrong. "Jake, stay here. Don't leave." I backed away from the campsite. This was wrong. All of it. The warm cairn, the voice, this abandoned camp with coals still burning. I needed to get back to the main trail. I turned and started retracing my steps through the rock passages, but the light was almost gone now, that deep blue twilight that makes everything look flat and distant. I clicked on my headlamp and swept the beam across the stone walls. That's when I saw the footprints. They were in a patch of sandy soil between 2 rocks. Boot prints, fresh, leading away from the fake campsite. But they weren't normal prints. The stride was too long, maybe 4 feet between steps, and the prints themselves, they started as boot prints, clear and defined. But halfway through the patch of sand, they changed. The heel marks got longer, the toe impressions spread wider. By the end of the patch, They looked less like boots and more like paws. I ran. I don't care how experienced you are, how much solo hiking you've done, how rational you think you can stay in a crisis. When you see footprints that change from human to animal in the space of 3 steps, you run. I crashed through the narrow rock passages, scraping my shoulders on the sandstone walls, my headlamp beam bouncing wildly. I had no idea if I was going the right direction. I just needed to get out of this maze, back to open ground, back to the trail. Behind me, I heard movement, not footsteps, something faster, something moving on 4 legs, claws clicking on rock. I burst out of the passages into open space and immediately recognized where I was. I could see the main trail about 30 yards ahead, that familiar packed earth cutting through the sagebrush. I sprinted toward it, my pack bouncing hard against my back. The moment my boots hit the trail, the sound behind me stopped. I spun around, headlamp raised. Nothing, just dark rock formations and empty space, but I could feel something watching me, something just beyond the reach of my light. I checked my watch. 6:40 p.m., full dark now. My original campsite was still at least 30 minutes ahead, but I wasn't going to make it. I wasn't hiking another step in the dark, not after what I'd just seen. I made a decision. I would hike back the way I'd come, back toward the trailhead. It was at least 6 miles, maybe more, but the trail was clear. I had my headlamp, and I had enough water. I'd rather hike all night on a marked trail than spend 1 minute in a tent out here. I turned around and started walking fast, back north the way I'd come. That's when I saw them, the cairns. There were at least a dozen now, lining both sides of the trail, all of them fresh, all of them in places where they definitely hadn't been 2 hours ago. And here's what made my blood cold. They were behind me. I had been walking south. These cairns should be in front of me if I was going back, but they were behind me, which meant they had been built while I was walking. They had been following me. I broke into a jog, then a run. My pack slammed against my back with each step, my breath coming in sharp gasps. The beam from my headlamp jumped and shook, catching glimpses of the trail ahead. I focused on my footing, on not twisting an ankle, on just moving forward. Jake. The voice was right next to me this time, right in my ear, but when I looked, there was nothing there. Jake, stop running. It wasn't Tyler's voice anymore. It was my voice. Something was using my own voice to call to me. I didn't stop. I ran harder. The trail curved through a section of taller formations, creating a natural corridor of stone. My headlamp caught movement ahead, a figure standing in the middle of the trail. It looked like a person, tall, maybe 6 feet, wearing a dark jacket and a baseball cap, just standing there, motionless. "Hey," I shouted, slowing down. "Are you okay?" The figure didn't respond, didn't move, just stood there, facing me. I got closer, my headlamp beam fully on the figure now, and that's when I saw it. The proportions were wrong. The arms were too long, hanging past the knees. The head was tilted at an angle that wasn't quite natural, and the face was my face. Not similar, not close. Exactly my face, down to the small scar on my chin from a mountain biking crash 3 years ago. It was wearing my expression, my neutral resting face, but there was something deeply wrong about it. The eyes didn't blink. The mouth didn't move to breathe. It took a step toward me. I ran off the trail. I crashed through the sagebrush, not caring about direction, just needing to get away from that thing. I heard it behind me, moving fast, that same sound of claws on rock that I'd heard in the maze. But now it was right behind me, getting closer. Ahead, I saw lights, actual electric lights, the parking area. I didn't think about how I'd gotten there so fast. I didn't think about how I'd somehow covered 6 miles in less than an hour. I just ran toward those lights like they were the only real thing left in the world. My boots hit asphalt. The visitor center was right there. Windows lit up. The ranger's truck parked outside. I ran to the door and yanked it open. The same ranger from earlier looked up from his desk, his expression not surprised at all. "You saw them," he said. It wasn't a question. I couldn't speak. I just nodded, leaning against the door frame, trying to catch my breath. He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the dark trailhead. "How many cairns?" I don't know. 12 more. And you heard your name?" "Yes. And I couldn't finish the sentence. "You saw yourself," he said quietly. I stared at him. "How did you know?" He turned away from the window and sat back down at his desk, pulling out an incident report form. "Because that's what they do. They build markers to lead you off trail. They learn your voice, your face. They try to make you follow them into the deep canyons where no one can find you." "What are they?" I asked, even though I already knew the answer. "Skinwalkers," he said simply, starting to fill out the form. "We get reports about twice a year, always in October, always solo hikers. The ones who follow the cairns." He didn't finish that sentence. "What happens to them? We find their gear, sometimes their boots. We don't find them." He finished writing and looked up at me. "You're lucky you turned back. You're lucky you didn't follow your friend's voice. And you're especially lucky you ran when you saw yourself, because that means it was getting desperate. It means you were close to making it back, and it needed you to stop." I sat down in one of the plastic chairs, my legs finally giving out. I filed a route plan, my campsite. "We'll mark you as returned early," he said. "You can pick up your permit tomorrow if you want to try again." "I don't," I said immediately. He almost smiled. "Smart." I spent that night in my car in the parking lot, doors locked, engine running, heat on full blast. Every time I started to doze off, I'd hear my own voice outside the window, calling my name, but I never looked. I kept my eyes on the dashboard clock, watching the minutes tick by until sunrise. At first light, I drove straight out of the park and didn't stop until I hit Moab. I reported everything to the ranger that morning before I left. He added my statement to a file that was already 3 inches thick. Other reports, other hikers, other people who saw the cairns that moved. Some of them made it back, some of them didn't. Here's what I learned that night in Canyonlands, and I'm telling you this because if you're reading this, you probably hike solo too. You probably think you're prepared. You probably think you know what's out there. If a ranger tells you not to follow cairns that aren't on your map, listen. If you hear someone calling your name in the backcountry and you know you're alone, don't answer. If you see trail markers appearing where they shouldn't be, turn around immediately and hike back to your car. Don't question it. Don't investigate. Just leave. And if you ever see yourself standing on the trail ahead of you, looking back at you with eyes that don't blink, run toward the nearest lights and don't stop until you're on pavement. The desert has been here for millions of years. We're just visitors, and some things out there learned a long time ago how to make sure visitors never leave. Before I go, do me a favor. If you've ever had something like this happen, if you've seen the cairns or heard the voices or found yourself somewhere you weren't supposed to be, leave a comment, share your story, because the more people who know about this, the more people who take the warning seriously, the fewer disappearances we'll have to read about in those incident reports. Stay safe out there. Stay on the trail. And if something tells you to follow it into the dark, remember that nothing good has ever come from something that has to trick you to get you alone. Trust me on that one. My uncle's hunting cabin had been empty for 3 years when I inherited it. So when I found fresh boot prints on the porch and smoke coming from the chimney, I figured squatters. I figured wrong. I'm Brett, 31 years old, been bow hunting since I was 14. My Uncle Roger taught me everything. How to track, how to read, sign, how to stay still for hours in a tree stand. He died in November of 2021, left me his cabin and his will. I hadn't been up there since the funeral. Work got busy, life got complicated, and honestly it hurt too much to go back without him. But this year I decided it was time. November 6th, 2024, opening week of rifle season. I loaded up my truck with gear, my bow, my rifles. enough food for 5 days, and drove north from Billings toward the cabin. It's about 40 miles off Highway 191, down a Forest Service road that turns to dirt after the first 10 miles and gets worse from there. The drive took 3 hours. By the time I pulled up to the cabin, it was almost 4 p.m. and the light was already going gray. November in Montana, you get maybe 6 hours of decent daylight. I parked next to the woodshed and sat there for a minute, looking at the place. It was exactly like I remembered. Single room, log cabin, maybe 20 by 20 feet, with a small covered porch and a stone chimney, elk antlers over the door. A hand-painted sign that said Camp Roger that my uncle made when he built the place in 1998. It sat in a small clearing surrounded by lodgepole pines, about a quarter mile from the nearest logging road. But something was wrong. There were boot prints in the dirt on the porch. Fresh ones, probably from this morning based on how clear the edges were, and smoke. Not a lot, just a thin gray line coming from the chimney, like someone had let a fire die down but the coals were still hot. I got out of the truck and walked up to the porch slowly, checking the ground. The boot prints were everywhere, coming and going from the cabin, over to the woodshed, down toward the creek. Size 11 or 12, same as mine, work boots with a deep tread pattern. The cabin door was closed but not locked. My uncle never locked it. He always said if someone needed shelter out here bad enough to break in, they probably needed it more than he needed privacy. I pushed the door open. The inside was clean, too clean. The floor had been swept recently. The wood stove in the corner had fresh ashes. The Coleman lantern on the table was full of fuel. The 2 bunk beds against the wall had been made up with blankets I didn't recognize, and on the table, next to the lantern, was a half-eaten can of beans and a spoon. Someone was living here. I checked the rest of the cabin, nothing missing that I could tell. My uncle's old rifle was still mounted over the door. His hunting gear was still hanging on the wall pegs. Even the whiskey bottle he kept on the shelf was untouched, still sealed. So not squatters. Not thieves, just someone using the cabin. I walked back outside and looked around the clearing. No other vehicles, no tent, no sign of where this person was sleeping besides inside. I checked the woodshed. Freshly split wood, neatly stacked. Someone had been working. My first thought was maybe the Forest Service had given someone permission to stay here, or maybe one of my uncle's old hunting buddies had been using it and didn't know Roger had passed. That happens sometimes in the backcountry. Handshake agreements that outlasted the people who made them. I decided to wait. If someone was staying here, they'd come back eventually. I could explain the situation, make sure there were no hard feelings, and figure out what to do. I unloaded my gear from the truck and brought it inside, set my rifle case by the door, hung my pack on the wall, put my food in the wooden cabinet we used as a pantry. Then I started a fire in the wood stove, more for comfort than heat. By the time I had the fire going, it was almost dark. I lit the Coleman lantern and sat down at the table, listening to the wind and the pines outside. That's when I heard the footsteps. Heavy boots on the porch, slow and deliberate. Then a knock on the door. "Come in," I called out. The door opened and a man stepped inside. He was tall, maybe 6'2", wearing canvas work pants, a flannel jacket, and a blaze orange hunting cap. He had a thick gray beard and weathered skin. He looked about 60. He looked exactly like my Uncle Roger. Not similar, not close, exactly like him, down to the small scar over his left eyebrow from a fishing accident in the 70s. Same build, same face, same gray beard trimmed the same way. I stood up so fast I knocked my chair over. "Easy there," the man said, holding up his hands. His voice was wrong, too smooth, too young. "Didn't mean to startle you." "Who are you?" I asked. My hand moved toward my belt where I kept my hunting knife. "Name's Jim," he said. "I've been looking after the place. Roger asked me to keep an eye on it a few years back." That was possible. Roger had friends all over these mountains, but this man looked exactly like him. Same face, and that wasn't possible. "Roger passed away," I said carefully. 3 years ago. Jim nodded slowly. Heard about that. Real shame. He was a good man. He walked over to the wood stove and held his hands out like he was warming them. But I could see from where I stood, the stove was still cold. I just started the fire 5 minutes ago. The metal wasn't even warm yet. How did you know Roger? I asked. Met him up here hunting. Must have been, 5 or 6 years back. We got to talking, became friends. He said I could use the cabin whenever I needed, long as I kept it maintained. Jim smiled. It was my uncle's smile. Exactly. I've been doing my best to honor that. What's your last name? I asked. Blackwood, he said without hesitation. I didn't know anyone named Blackwood in my uncle's life, and I would have known. I went through all his papers, his address book, his phone records when he died. There was no Jim Blackwood. You been staying here long? I asked. On and off, few days at a time. I try to come up before the season starts, make sure everything's working, split some wood, clear the mice out. He looked around the cabin like he owned it. Looks good, doesn't it? Yeah, I said. Real good. We stood there in silence for a moment. The fire crackled in the stove. Outside, the wind picked up, making the pines creak. Well, Jim said finally, I'll let you get settled in. I've got my camp about half a mile east if you need anything. Just follow the creek. He moved toward the door, then stopped and looked back at me. You look just like him. You know, like Roger. Must be family. I'm his nephew, I said. Thought so. He smiled again. That too perfect smile. Well, welcome home, Brett. I never told him my name. He walked out and closed the door behind him. I stood there frozen, listening to his footsteps move across the porch and down into the clearing. They were too light. A man that size should have made the old boards creak, but I barely heard him. I waited until I couldn't hear the footsteps anymore. Then I grabbed my flashlight and went to the window. I could see boot prints in the dirt leading away from the cabin toward the tree line. But as I watched, following the prints with my flashlight beam, I saw them change. The first few prints were normal boot treads, but after about 10 feet, they got longer. The heel mark disappeared. The toe spread out. By the time they reached the trees, they looked like something walking on 4 legs. I locked the door. My uncle never locked it, but I locked it. Then I checked every window, made sure the latches were secure. I pulled my rifle out of its case and loaded it, even though it was illegal to have a loaded firearm inside a structure. Right then, I didn't care about game laws. I sat at the table with my back to the wall, rifle across my lap, and tried to think. That man, that thing, looked exactly like my Uncle Roger. It knew my name without me telling it. It said it had a camp half a mile east, but those footprints told me it didn't have a camp. It had a den, or a burrow, or whatever place those things go when they're not pretending to be human. I thought about leaving, getting in my truck and driving back to Billings, but it was full dark now, and that Forest Service road was dangerous enough in daylight. At night, one wrong turn and you're in a ditch, or worse, over an embankment, and something told me that's exactly what that thing wanted, for me to run, to panic, to make a mistake. So I decided to wait until morning. First light, I'd pack up and leave. Until then, I'd stay inside, stay armed, and stay awake. Around 7 p.m., I heard it again. Footsteps on the porch, slow circles, like someone pacing. Then the footsteps stopped right in front of the door. A voice called out, my uncle's voice, perfect, every inflection, every tone. Brett, you okay in there? Heard you moving around. Wanted to make sure you didn't need anything. I didn't answer. Brett, can you hear me? I stayed silent, watching the door. The latch was secure, the deadbolt was thrown, but the door was old wood, and if something wanted in badly enough. All right then, the voice said. I'll be at my camp if you need me. Sleep well. The footsteps moved away, but this time they went to the window. I watched as a shadow passed in front of the glass, blocking the moonlight. A hand pressed against the window, fingers spread wide. The fingers were too long. The nails were dark and curved. Then the shadow moved away and disappeared into the trees. I didn't sleep. I sat at that table all night, rifle ready, watching the door and windows. Around midnight, I heard something on the roof. Slow footsteps, like something walking back and forth across the shingles, testing, looking for a way in. I kept the fire going in the wood stove, kept the lantern lit. Light felt safe. Light felt human. Around 2 a.m., the scratching started. Not at the door, at the log walls. A slow, deliberate sound, like something dragging claws across wood. It moved around the entire cabin, testing every wall, every corner, every gap in the logs. Then it stopped. I heard my uncle's voice again, but this time it was different, desperate. "Brett, please. I'm hurt. I need help." I gripped the rifle tighter. "Brett, please. It's cold out here. Just let me in for a few minutes." The voice was right outside the door now. I could hear breathing, fast and shallow, not like a person catching their breath, but like something that didn't quite know how breathing worked. "Brett, I'm your uncle. You know me. Please." I aimed the rifle at the door. The door handle started to turn, slowly, testing the lock. The deadbolt held, but I could see the handle rotating, back and forth, back and forth. Then it stopped. Silence. I waited, barely breathing, watching the door. Minutes passed. The fire crackled. The wind outside died down. Everything was still. That's when I heard it behind me. A voice, whispering, right behind my chair. "Brett." I spun around, rifle up. Nothing. The back wall was solid. No windows, no doors. Just logs and the shelf with my uncle's whiskey bottle. But I heard it, right behind me, inside the cabin. I stood up and backed into the corner, covering both the door and the room. My hands were shaking. I could feel sweat running down my back despite the cold. "Brett, I'm already inside." The whisper came from the rafters now. I looked up. The shadows in the ceiling beam shifted and moved in the lamplight. Or maybe they didn't. Maybe I was just seeing things. Maybe 5 hours of fear and no sleep were getting to me. I kept the rifle up, sweeping across the rafters, the walls, the bunks. Nothing. Just shadows and old wood and my own ragged breathing. Then I remembered something my uncle told me once. We were up here hunting, sitting by the fire, and he told me about the things in these mountains, the things that weren't animals and weren't human. He said the old tribes had rules about them. Don't invite them in. Don't believe what they show you. And most importantly, they can't touch you once the sun comes up. I checked my watch. 4:30 a.m. Sunrise was around 7, 2.5 hours. I could last 2.5 hours. The scratching started again, louder this time. Not on the walls, on the door. Long, dragging sounds, like something trying to claw through the wood. I could see splinters falling to the floor inside. It was getting through. I raised my rifle and aimed at the door, finger on the trigger. If it came through, I'd shoot. I didn't care what it looked like. I didn't care if it wore my uncle's face. The scratching stopped. Silence again. Then a voice from outside, calm and reasonable. My uncle's voice. "Brett, you're being ridiculous. It's freezing out here. I just want to come inside and warm up. Your family. Roger would want you to help me." "You're not Jim," I said, my voice hoarse. "And you're not my uncle." Silence. Then laughter. Not human laughter. Something that sounded like it learned to laugh by hearing it once and trying to copy it. High-pitched and wrong. "Smart boy," the voice said, dropping the pretense. It didn't sound like my uncle anymore. It didn't sound like anything. "But you can't stay in there forever. I can stay until sunrise," I said. More laughter. Then the voice got quiet, almost gentle. "Maybe. But I'll be here tomorrow night. And the night after. And every night you're in these mountains. How long can you stay awake, Brett? How many nights can you go without sleep?" I didn't answer. "I can wait," it said. "I'm very patient." The scratching started again, But this time it was at every wall simultaneously. The door, the windows, the logs, even the roof, surrounding the cabin, testing every surface, looking for weakness. I backed into the corner and held my rifle ready. The lamp on the table flickered. The fire in the stove was dying down. I needed to add more wood, but that meant moving away from the corner, leaving my back exposed. The scratching got louder, more frantic. Whatever was out there was running out of time. Sunrise was coming. I checked my watch. 5:45 a.m., a little over an hour. The lamp flickered again and went out. I was in the dark, except for the dying glow from the wood stove. I pulled out my flashlight and clicked it on, sweeping the beam across the cabin. The shadows jumped and moved. I couldn't tell what was real and what was my imagination. Something hit the door, hard. The whole frame shook. Once, twice, 3 times. I aimed the rifle and waited. Then it stopped. I heard footsteps moving away from the cabin, not running, just walking, calm and slow, fading into the trees. I waited, not moving, not lowering the rifle. My arms were screaming, my back was cramped, but I held position, watching the door, watching the windows, watching for any sign it was coming back. The darkness outside started to fade, not full sunrise yet, just that pre-dawn gray where you can start to see shapes. I kept my flashlight on, kept the rifle up, and waited. 6:30 a.m. The gray turned to blue. I could see the clearing outside now. Empty, no movement, no tracks that I could see from the window. 7:15 a.m. The sun broke over the ridge to the east, cutting through the pines, flooding the clearing with golden light. I finally lowered the rifle. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely function. I sat down at the table and just breathed for a few minutes, trying to get my heart rate under control. The cabin looked normal in the daylight. Just an old hunting cabin, wood stove, bunks, table. Nothing supernatural, nothing wrong, except the door. I walked over and looked at it in the sunlight. Deep scratches in the wood, running parallel, like something with 4 claws had tried to dig through. Fresh splinters on the floor. The scratches went halfway through the door in some places. I packed my gear in 10 minutes. Didn't bother with food, didn't bother with cleaning up. Just grabbed my rifle, my pack, my essentials, and loaded them into the truck. I'd come back for the rest later. Or maybe I wouldn't. Before I left, I walked around the cabin in daylight, looking at the ground. The boot prints from yesterday were still there, but now I could see where they changed. About 20 feet from the porch, the prints transitioned from boot treads to paw prints. Big ones, easily 6 inches across, with claw marks in the dirt. The tracks led into the trees to the east, toward where Jim said his camp was. I got in my truck and drove out. The Forest Service road looked different in daylight, narrower than I remembered, more overgrown. I kept checking my rearview mirror, expecting to see something following me, but the road stayed empty. I drove straight to the nearest Forest Service ranger station, about 30 miles south on Highway 191. The wildlife officer on duty was a woman named Sarah Campos, maybe late 30s, with a look of someone who'd spent her entire career in the backcountry. I told her everything. The man who looked like my uncle, the changing footprints, the scratching, all of it. She listened without interrupting, taking notes. When I finished, she set down her pen and looked at me. "Camp Roger, off the East Fork logging road?" she asked. "Yeah, how did you know?" "Because you're the 4th person to report something at that location in the last 2 years, she said. She pulled out a file from her desk drawer and opened it. Inside were incident reports, photos, witness statements. We've had 3 other hunters report similar encounters. Man matching the description of the property owner, but the owner's been dead for years. Footprints that change from human to animal. Scratching sounds at night. One hunter shot at it through the door. Found blood on the porch in the morning, but it wasn't human blood. Wasn't any animal we could identify either." "What is it?" I asked. She closed the file. "Off the record? The tribes around here call them Skinwalkers. Yi Naod Lushi, witches that can change shape, mimic voices, or the faces of the dead. On the record, I tell people it's probably a bear or a mountain lion, acting unusual. You don't believe that, I said. No, she admitted. I don't, but I can't put Skinwalker on an official report. What I can do is flag your uncle's property in our system. Other officers will know there's something wrong there, and I can advise you not to go back alone. If you need to retrieve your gear, go during daylight, go with multiple people, and don't stay past 4 p.m. I nodded. I'm not going back at all. Smart, she said. Most people who have an encounter like yours, they don't. The ones who do. She didn't finish that sentence. I left the ranger station and drove back to Billings. I called a real estate agent from the road. Camp Roger went on the market a week later. I sold it to a developer who planned to tear it down and build a vacation house. I didn't tell him what happened there. Maybe I should have. But I figured the land itself was fine. It was just inhabited by something that didn't want visitors. I still hunt, but I don't go solo anymore. And I don't camp in that part of Montana. Too many trees, too many shadows, too many places for something to watch you from just outside the firelight. Here's what I learned that night at my uncle's cabin. If someone shows up claiming to know your dead relatives, look at their eyes. Really, look. Because the thing wearing that face might get the features right, but it can't fake the eyes. They're always wrong. Too bright, too focused, like something studying you instead of seeing you. And if you're ever in a remote cabin and something starts scratching at the walls, don't open the door. Don't try to fight it. Just keep the lights on and wait for sunrise. Because whatever those things are, they follow old rules. They can't come in unless invited, and they can't touch you once the sun comes up. My uncle used to say the mountains teach you respect. I thought he meant respect for the weather, the terrain, the animals. Now I know he meant respect for the things that live there that we don't have names for, the things that know these mountains better than we ever will. If you hunt in remote areas, if you use old cabins or established camps, pay attention to the signs, boot prints that don't match, doors that should be locked standing open, fires that shouldn't be lit. Those aren't accidents. Those are warnings. Something's there, something's watching, and it's deciding whether you're worth the effort. Trust your gut. If a place feels wrong, it probably is. Don't stay just because you drove 6 hours to get there. Don't stay because you paid for the permit. Your life is worth more than 5 days of hunting. And if you see your reflection looking back at you from outside the window, if it smiles when you don't, leave immediately. Because that means it's not your reflection anymore. If this story sounds familiar, if you've had something similar happen, share it in the comments. The more people who know about these things, the fewer people who'll make the mistake of staying somewhere they shouldn't. The fewer people who'll open the door when something wearing a familiar face asks to come inside. Stay safe out there. Hunt in groups. Trust the daylight. And never, ever invite something into your shelter that you didn't see arrive in full sun. Because my uncle was right about one thing. The mountains do teach respect. Sometimes they teach it the hard way. I've driven the same route home from my night shift for 4 years, and I've never missed my exit, not once. So when I realized I'd been on the highway for 40 minutes past where I should have turned off, I knew something was wrong. My name's Kyle. I'm 33, work third shift at a manufacturing plant outside Farmington, New Mexico, 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., 5 days a week. The route home is simple. Highway 64 east for 22 miles, exit at road 3,900, then another 8 miles on county roads to my house. I've driven it probably 1,000 times. I could do it asleep. Maybe that was the problem. It was March 9th, 2024, around 7:20 in the morning. I just clocked out, grabbed my thermos of coffee, and headed to my truck. Normal morning. Cold, clear, that pre-dawn gray where everything looks flat and colorless. I pulled out of the plant parking lot and headed east on 64. The highway was empty. That wasn't unusual for this time of morning on a Thursday. Most of the traffic comes later when the day shift heads in. I had the road to myself, just me and the sunrise starting to break over the mesas to my left. I remember putting on a podcast, something about unsolved mysteries. I remember drinking my coffee. I remember checking my speedometer because there's a speed trap about 10 miles out where the limit drops from 70 to 55. Then I blinked, and I was somewhere I didn't recognize. The highway looked the same, 2 lanes, sagebrush on both sides, mesas in the distance. But the light was different. It should have been full sunrise by now, maybe 7:45 or so. Instead, it was still that gray, pre-dawn color, like time had stopped moving forward. I checked my phone, 7:53 a.m., but the sun was still barely over the horizon. I looked for a mile marker, couldn't find one. I looked for my exit, couldn't find that either. I'd been driving on autopilot, letting muscle memory guide me, but now I was paying attention and nothing looked right. I slowed down and checked my GPS. It showed me on Highway 64, but the map looked wrong. The road curved in places where I knew it ran straight. The exit for 3,900 wasn't showing up. My house marker was there, but it said I was 42 miles away. That was impossible. I should have been 10 minutes from home. I pulled over onto the shoulder and stopped, put the truck in park, sat there trying to figure out what had happened. Did I take a wrong turn? Did I somehow get on a different highway? But I'd been on 64 the whole time. I knew this road. I drove it every single morning. I looked at my fuel gauge, half a tank. I'd filled up yesterday after work, so that was right. But if I'd been driving for 40 minutes longer than normal, I should have used more gas. Something was wrong with time, or distance, or both. I decided to turn around, head back west, find something I recognized, and figure out where I'd gone wrong. I checked my mirrors, checked for traffic, and started to pull a U-turn. That's when I saw the car. It was behind me, maybe a quarter mile back, pulled over on the shoulder just like mine. A dark sedan, looked like a Toyota or Honda. I hadn't seen it pull over. I hadn't seen it on the road at all, but there it was, just sitting there. I finished my U-turn and started driving west, back the way I'd come. As I passed the sedan, I glanced over. Someone was sitting in the driver's seat. A man, I think, wearing a baseball cap. He didn't look at me as I drove past, just stared straight ahead. Something about that bothered me, but I couldn't figure out what. I kept driving. The highway looked the same going west as it had going east. Empty, flat, sagebrush and mesas, no landmarks I recognized, no signs, no mile markers. I checked my rearview mirror. The sedan was following me now, not close, maybe a quarter mile back, but definitely following, same speed as me, same distance maintained. I sped up to 75. The sedan sped up too, still a quarter mile back. I slowed down to 50. The sedan slowed down, same distance. I tried to see the driver in my mirror, but the distance was too far and the morning light was still weird, flat and gray. I could just make out the shape of someone in the driver's seat, still wearing that baseball cap, still not looking left or right, just staring straight ahead at my truck. I drove for another 10 minutes. The sedan stayed behind me, never getting closer, never falling back, just maintaining that exact same distance. Then I saw my exit, road 3,900, right where it should be. I felt a rush of relief. I'd somehow gotten turned around, driven too far, but now I was back on track. I'd take the exit, get home, get some sleep, and figure out what the hell happened later. I put on my turn signal and took the exit. In my mirror, I saw the sedan's turn signal come on. It followed me off the highway. The county road was even more isolated than the highway. No houses out here, just BLM land and the occasional ranch gate. 8 miles of empty 2-lane blacktop before I'd hit the turn from my property. The sedan stayed behind me, still that same quarter-mile distance. I thought about stopping, getting out and confronting whoever was following me, but something told me that was a bad idea. Something about the way that car moved, the way it maintained that exact distance, felt wrong. So I kept driving, and I started paying attention to details. The landscape looked right. I recognized the wash that ran parallel to the road. I recognized the collapsed windmill about 3 miles in. I recognized the shape of the mesa to my north. This was definitely the right road, but it was taking too long. I should have been at my turnoff by now. I'd been on this county road for at least 15 minutes, but the landmarks weren't moving past like they should. The collapsed windmill stayed in view for way too long, like I was driving on a treadmill, making progress but not actually getting anywhere. I checked my odometer. It showed I'd driven 6.2 miles since the exit, but I should have driven at least 10 by now at this speed. I looked in my rearview mirror. The sedan was still there, same distance, but now I could see more details. The car looked old, maybe from the 90s. Faded paint, dirty windshield, and the driver's head was tilted at a wrong angle, not like someone looking at the road, like someone whose neck was broken but they were still driving. My hands tightened on the wheel. I sped up to 80. The speed limit out here was 55, but I didn't care. I needed to get home. I needed to get somewhere with other people, with lights, with something real and normal. The sedan sped up too, still maintaining that distance. I saw my driveway coming up on the right, the mailbox with my house number, the cattle guard, the dirt road that led half a mile back to my house. I took the turn fast, tires kicking up dust. I drove down my driveway going 40 miles an hour, not caring about the washboard ruts or the rocks. I just needed to get to my house. I pulled up in front and put the truck in park, grabbed my phone, looked at the driveway behind me. The sedan was there, at the end of my driveway, where the dirt met the county road, just sitting there, idling. The driver was still visible in the front seat, head tilted at that wrong angle, facing my direction. I got out of my truck and stood in my driveway, phone in hand, ready to call 911. The sedan didn't move, just sat there, engine running, driver motionless. I looked at my house. Everything looked normal. Porch light still on from when I'd left for work yesterday. My dog Cisco's face in the window, watching me. Everything normal. I looked back at the sedan, still there. I made a decision. I ran to my front door, unlocked it, and got inside. Cisco met me, tail wagging, acting normal. I went straight to the window and looked out at the driveway. The sedan was gone. I stood there for a full minute, watching the empty driveway, the empty county road beyond. No dust cloud, no engine sounds, nothing, like it had never been there. I checked every window in my house, front, back, sides, no sedan, no cars at all, just empty desert and my truck in the driveway. I tried to sleep but couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that driver with their head tilted wrong, so I stayed up, drank coffee, kept watch out the windows. Nothing happened. Just a normal March day in New Mexico. Wind and sun and crows calling from the power lines. That night, I called in sick to work. I wasn't driving that route in the dark again. Not yet. I needed time to process what had happened. Around 9 p.m., my phone rang. Unknown number, local area code. I answered. Hello? Silence. Then breathing, slow and deliberate, not like someone catching their breath, like something that had to remember how breathing worked. Who is this? I asked. More breathing, then a voice. My voice. Exactly my voice, down to the slight rasp I have from years of smoking. Kyle, you took the wrong exit. I hung up, blocked the number, sat there staring at my phone, heart pounding. It called back from a different number. I didn't answer. It went to voicemail. I played the message back. My voice again. Kyle, you're supposed to be on the highway. You need to come back. I deleted it. Blocked that number too. It didn't call again that night. But at 3 a.m., I heard something outside. Footsteps on my gravel driveway. Slow and measured. I looked out the window and saw someone walking up to my truck. It was me. Same height, same build, same jacket I'd been wearing that morning, same walk, that slight limp I have from a knee injury last year. It walked around my truck, looking in the windows, checking the doors. Then it stopped and looked directly at the house, directly at the window where I was standing. It smiled, my smile, but wrong, too wide, held too long. I grabbed my shotgun from the closet. By the time I got back to the window, it was gone. My truck was undisturbed. The driveway was empty. I didn't sleep that night either. The next day, I drove to the sheriff's office in Farmington. I told Deputy Collins everything. The lost time on the highway, the sedan following me, the phone calls, the thing that looked like me in my driveway. He listened, taking notes. He didn't look skeptical. He didn't look surprised. He just nodded and wrote it all down. When I finished, he set down his pen and looked at me. "You work third shift at the plant?" he asked. "Yeah. Drive home on 64 every morning." He nodded slowly. "You're the third person this month to report something like this. Same highway, same time of day, same following." "What is it?" I asked. He didn't answer right away, just pulled out a file from his desk and opened it. Inside were reports, witness statements, photos. I saw pictures of cars pulled over on Highway 64. Footprints in the dirt that went from human shoes to something else. Voicemail transcripts where people reported hearing their own voices calling them. "Off the record," he said quietly. "We think something's using that highway. Something that hunts during that transition time between night and day. It picks isolated drivers, follows them, learns their voice, their appearance, tries to replace them." "Replace them?" I said. "The people who report this, they're fine. They get away. But," he flipped through the file, "we've had 4 missing persons in the last year. All third shift workers, all drove Highway 64 east around sunrise, all vanished between the plant and their homes. We find their cars eventually, pulled over on the shoulder, doors open, keys in the ignition, no signs of struggle, just empty." "Jesus," I whispered. "The Navajo Nation police call it a skinwalker," Deputy Collins said. "Something that can mimic people. We've had reports from truck drivers, plant workers, nurses coming off night shift. Always the same story. They lose time. They see something following them. They hear their own voice calling to them." "What happens if they stop?" I asked. "What happens if they get out of the car?" He closed the file. "We don't know, because nobody who stops ever reports back. He told me to vary my route home. Don't take 64 for a while. Use Highway 550 instead, even though it adds 20 minutes. Don't drive alone if possible. And most importantly, if I ever see that sedan again, don't stop. Don't acknowledge it. Just keep driving until I reach somewhere with people and lights." I followed his advice. For 3 weeks, I took the long way home, Highway 550 south, then county roads, adding an extra 40 minutes to my commute. Nothing followed me, no lost time, no phone calls, everything normal. Then last week, I had to work a double shift. I got out at 3 p.m. instead of 7 a.m., broad daylight. I figured it would be safe to take my old route. I got on Highway 64 heading east, middle of the afternoon. Traffic was normal, cars passing in both directions, everything normal, until I saw the sedan. It was pulled over on the shoulder about 10 miles from my exit. Same car, same faded paint, same dirty windshield. But this time, I could see inside clearly because of the daylight. There was no driver. The car was empty, engine off, doors closed, just sitting there on the shoulder. I kept driving, didn't slow down, didn't stare, just kept my eyes forward and my speed steady. In my rearview mirror, I saw the sedan's engine start, saw it pull onto the highway. No driver visible, just an empty car accelerating, merging into traffic, following me. I took my exit going 70 miles an hour. The sedan followed. I drove down the county road going 80. The sedan stayed behind me, maintaining that same quarter-mile distance. I pulled into my driveway and ran from my house, got inside, locked the door, looked out the window. The sedan was at the end of my driveway, just sitting there, still no driver visible, but the driver's side door was opening, slowly. I watched as something got out. It looked like me. Same clothes I was wearing, same face, same everything, but it moved wrong. The joints bent at slightly wrong angles. The walk was almost right, but not quite. It started walking up my driveway toward my house. I called 911, told them someone was on my property, told them to send deputies immediately. The thing that looked like me stopped about 50 feet from my front door. It stood there, watching the house, waiting. I could hear sirens in the distance. The thing heard them too. It tilted its head, listening. Then it smiled that too wide smile and walked back to the sedan, got in, the door closed by itself. The sedan backed down my driveway, turned around, and drove away. By the time the deputies arrived 5 minutes later, it was gone. Deputy Collins came out himself this time. He took my statement. He took photos of the footprints in my driveway. He measured them. The first few prints were normal boot treads, same as my work boots. But halfway up the driveway, they changed, got longer. The heel disappeared. By the time they reached the spot where the thing had stopped, they looked like paw prints, big ones, with claw marks. He showed me the photos, same as the others, he said. What do I do? I asked. I can't avoid this highway forever. I can't quit my job. I live here. You move, he said simply, or you change shifts, work days, because whatever this thing is, it's fixated on you now. It knows where you live. It knows what you look like. And it's patient. It'll wait for another chance. I put in my 2 weeks' notice the next day, found a day shift job at a warehouse in town, put my house up for sale. I'm not staying in a place where something can show up wearing my face whenever it wants. But here's the thing that keeps me up at night. Last week, I was in Farmington getting groceries. I saw someone who looked exactly like me. Same clothes, same walk, same face. They were getting into a car in the parking lot. A dark sedan, faded paint, dirty windshield. They looked at me, made eye contact, smiled that too wide smile, got in the car and drove away. I don't know if I got away or if it let me go. I don't know if I'm the real Kyle or if I'm what came back from that highway. Some days I feel wrong in my own skin, like I don't quite fit right in my body. But I know one thing. If you work night shift, if you drive isolated highways at dawn or dusk, pay attention to the time, pay attention to your route. If you suddenly realize you've driven too far, if you've missed an exit you never miss, turn around immediately. Get off that highway. Go somewhere public and wait for full daylight or full dark. Because there's something that hunts in the transition time, something that uses highways like trap lines. And if it picks you, if it decides you're worth following, it'll learn everything about you, your voice, your face, your route home, and eventually, it'll try to take your place. If you ever see a car following you that maintains the same distance no matter how you change speed, don't stop, don't get out. Just keep driving to somewhere with people and call the police. And if you ever hear your own voice calling to you from somewhere you're not, run. Because that means something's already copied you, and it's trying to figure out how to replace you. I'm sharing this because people need to know. Third shift workers, truck drivers, anyone who drives isolated roads at the wrong times. The reports are increasing. Deputy Collins told me they've had 7 missing persons this year so far, all the same pattern, all last seen on Highway 64 at dawn. If you've experienced something like this, leave a comment, share your story, because the more people who know about this, the more people who take the warning seriously, the fewer empty cars we'll find on the shoulder with the keys still in the ignition. Stay alert, vary your route, travel in groups if possible, and trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Because the thing on that highway isn't just hunting, it's collecting, and I don't think I'm the only one it let go. I think there are others out there, walking around, thinking they're fine, not realizing they brought something back with them. Check your reflection sometimes. Really look at it. Make sure it moves exactly when you move. Make sure it blinks when you blink. Make sure it's really you looking back, because if it's not, you might already be gone. My trail camera caught something on September 12th that I still can't explain. I wish I'd never checked the SD card. Some things you can't unsee. I'm Todd, 37 years old, been hunting whitetail in Wisconsin for 20 years. I run 6 trail cameras on my 100-acre property near the Checkamauga-Nicolet National Forest. Every 2 weeks during the season, I hike out and swap the SD cards, check what's been moving through. Usually it's deer, some coyotes, the occasional bear, normal stuff. This year I set my cameras up the last week of August, 2024. Got them positioned along game trails, near scrapes, one by a mineral lick, standard setup. I was targeting a big 8-point I'd seen on my property last season, wanted to pattern his movement before bow season opened. September 12th was a Thursday. I'd taken the afternoon off work to check my cameras before the weekend. Beautiful fall day, temp in the low 60s, leaves just starting to turn. I started at my southern property line and worked my way north, collecting SD cards and replacing batteries. The first 5 cameras showed exactly what I expected. Dozen fawns moving through at dawn and dusk, a few young bucks, coyotes at night, raccoons, one good shot of a bobcat I was excited about, normal Wisconsin wildlife. The 6th camera was different. It was mounted on an oak tree about 40 yards off the main trail, overlooking a natural clearing where deer like to bed down. I positioned it carefully, angled it to catch movement coming from 3 directions. It was one of my better spots. When I pulled the SD card, I noticed something odd. The camera's infrared sensor had triggered way more times than usual. Most cameras in a 2-week period might capture a few hundred images. This one had over 2,000. I figured maybe a branch had been moving in the wind, triggering false positives. Or maybe a curious raccoon had been messing with it. I stuck the card in my pocket and kept moving. I'd review everything when I got home. That evening, I loaded all 6 cards onto my computer, started going through the images one by one. The first 5 were routine. Then I opened the folder from camera 6. The first few hundred images were normal. Deer bedded in the clearing, a porcupine waddling through at 2 a.m., more deer at dawn. Then, around 3:47 a.m. on September 7th, things got weird. The first image showed the clearing empty, just grass and ferns, illuminated by the camera's infrared flash. Timestamp, 3 hours 47 minutes and 23 seconds. The second image, 3 seconds later, showed something standing at the edge of the frame. Timestamp, 3 hours 47 minutes and 26 seconds. It looked like a man, tall, maybe 6.5 feet, very thin, wearing what looked like dark clothes or maybe a dark coat. The infrared made it hard to tell colors. Everything was black and white and gray, but the posture was wrong. The arms hung too low. The head seemed too small for the body. The third image showed it closer. It had moved about 10 feet in 3 seconds. Fast, but not impossibly so. Now I could see more detail. The face, if it was a face, was pale in the infrared. No features that I could make out clearly. Just a white oval shape where a face should be. The fourth image showed it in the center of the clearing. It had covered another 15 feet, and now I could see something that made my stomach drop. It was on all fours, not crouching, not crawling, moving on all fours like an animal, but with limbs that were far too long for any animal I knew. The arms and legs were bent at joints that didn't look right. The spine curved in a way that shouldn't be possible. The fifth image showed it looking directly at the camera. The head was turned toward the lens. That pale, featureless face aimed right at me through time, and even though there were no visible eyes in the infrared wash, I could feel it staring. Then the camera went crazy. Image after image, 3-second intervals, showing the thing circling the camera, getting closer. the perspective changing as it moved around the tree, sometimes on 2 legs, sometimes on 4. The body shifting between postures so fluid it didn't look like it had bones. At 3 hours 52 minutes and 14 seconds, there was an image of it directly in front of the camera, maybe 5 feet away. The face filled most of the frame, and in this one, I could see details. The mouth was too wide. The eyes, there were eyes, but they reflected the infrared like an animal's, bright white circles, too large, too far apart. At 3 hours 52 minutes and 17 seconds, the camera angle shifted. The image was tilted, like something had grabbed the camera and moved it. The view showed the ground, the base of the tree, and in the corner of the frame, a hand, too many fingers, nails that were too long and too curved. Then 200 images of nothing. Just the ground, the tree bark, leaves. The camera had been tilted down, aimed at nothing useful. At 6 hours, 15 minutes and 33 seconds, the angle shifted back. Someone, something, had repositioned the camera. The view was back to normal, showing the clearing. The timestamp showed it was now full daylight. And in the center of the clearing, positioned deliberately where the camera would see it, was a deer carcass. It wasn't a normal kill. The deer had been arranged, positioned on its back with its legs spread. The ribcage had been opened and spread wide like wings. The head was missing. And in the dirt next to the body, something had drawn a symbol I didn't recognize, a circle with lines radiating out, and what looked like a crude stick figure in the center. The next few hundred images showed the clearing empty, just that arranged deer carcass slowly being discovered by scavengers, crows, coyotes. They approached it carefully, skittish, not feeding aggressively like they normally would, like they knew something was wrong with it. At 8:22 and 45 seconds p.m. that same night, the thing came back. It walked into the clearing on 2 legs this time, moving with an almost human gait, but the proportions were still wrong, the arms still too long. It stopped next to the deer carcass and stood there for 15 images, just standing, motionless, the pale face aimed at the camera. Then it bent down and picked up the deer. The way it moved, the way it lifted something that had to weigh 120 pounds. It was effortless, like picking up a pillow. It held the carcass at arm's length and walked out of frame. The camera didn't trigger again until 2 nights later. September 9th, 2:13 and 7 seconds a.m. The clearing was empty. Then, at 2 hours 13 minutes and 10 seconds, the thing was back. This time it was carrying something else. I had to zoom in on the image to see what it was. A backpack, bright blue, the kind hikers use. It set the backpack in the center of the clearing, in the same spot where the deer had been. Then it opened the backpack and started pulling things out. A water bottle, a fleece jacket, a headlamp, hiking boots. It arranged them in a circle around the backpack, deliberately, carefully. Then it stood up and walked toward the camera, got closer than it ever had before. At 2 hours, 15 minutes and 43 seconds, the thing's face filled the entire frame. I could see every detail in the harsh infrared light. The skin was wrong. It had a texture like tree bark or dried leather. The eyes were completely black, except for those white reflective circles that made them look like coins in empty sockets. The mouth was closed, but I could see it was too wide, stretching almost ear to ear. And here's what made me drop my coffee mug when I first saw it. In this image, the thing was smiling. Not a human smile. Something approximating a smile, like it had seen people smile and was trying to copy it. The corners of that too wide mouth turned up, but there was nothing friendly about it. Nothing warm. It was the smile of something that understood smiles meant something to humans but didn't understand what. At 2 hours, 15 minutes and 46 seconds, the camera went black. Not tilted, not covered, just black, like something had been placed directly over the lens. The next 500 images were completely black. Then, at 6:47 and 12 seconds, a.m., September 10th. The blockage was removed. Daylight flooded the sensor. The clearing was visible again. The backpack and gear were gone. The circle pattern in the dirt was gone. The clearing looked completely normal. If I hadn't seen the previous images, I would have thought nothing had ever been there. But there was something new. Scratched into the bark of the tree, right next to where my camera was mounted, was a symbol. The same symbol that had been drawn in the dirt next to the deer. A circle with radiating lines and a stick figure. The camera ran normally for the next 2 days. Deer moving through. A fox. Normal wildlife. Then on September 12th, the day I came to check it, something triggered the camera at 6:15 a.m. A person, walking into the clearing, wearing jeans and a flannel shirt and a blaze orange cap, carrying what looked like the blue backpack from before. The person walked to the center of the clearing and stopped, turned toward the camera, and even though the image was in full daylight now, even though I could see the person clearly, something was wrong with them. The proportions were almost right. The face was almost normal, but the way they stood, the angle of the arms, the tilt of the head, it was like someone doing an impression of a human. Close enough to pass at a distance, not close enough if you really looked. The person waved at the camera, a slow, deliberate wave. Then they turned and walked out of frame, heading north, toward the main trail, toward where I would be walking that afternoon to check the cameras. I sat at my computer, staring at that final image for a long time. Then I went through the whole sequence again, making sure I'd seen what I thought I'd seen, making sure I wasn't misinterpreting shadows or image compression artifacts. But no, it was clear. Something had been visiting that clearing, something that could move on 2 legs, or 4. Something that arranged deer carcasses and collected human belongings, and scratched symbols into trees, something that could approximate looking human but couldn't quite get it right. And it had been there that morning, 6 hours before I showed up. I grabbed my phone and called the DNR, talked to a conservation warden named Peterson. I told him I had unusual trail camera footage from my property, possible trespasser, possible poaching evidence. I didn't mention the parts that would make me sound crazy. He said he'd come by the next morning to review the footage. That night, I didn't sleep. I kept thinking about that final image, the person in blaze orange waving at my camera, the person who was walking toward the trail where I would be. Had I walked past it that afternoon? Had it been watching me from the trees while I collected my SD cards? Had I been within a few yards of it without knowing? I checked all my doors and windows 3 times, made sure they were locked. I don't usually lock up, not out here in the country, but that night I did. Around 2 a.m., my dogs started barking, both of them going crazy at the back door. I grabbed my shotgun and turned on the porch lights. Nothing, just the yard, the tree line, the dark woods beyond. My dogs were focused on something out there, hackles up, barking that deep warning bark they only use when something's really wrong. I stood at the window watching for 20 minutes. The dogs eventually calmed down, but they stayed by the back door, alert and nervous. When morning came, I went outside to check the yard, found tracks in the soft ground near the tree line, boot prints, large ones, size 12 or 13. They came out of the woods, approached within about 30 feet of my house, then circled back into the trees. But here's what bothered me. The tracks coming out of the woods were normal boot prints. The tracks going back, they changed, started as boots, then transitioned to something else. Something with claws. The stride got longer, the gait changed. By the time they reached the tree line, they weren't boot prints anymore. Warden Peterson showed up at 9 a.m. I showed him everything, the full sequence of images, the arranged deer carcass, the backpack, the thing walking on 4 legs, the final image of the person in blaze orange. He watched without interrupting, took notes, asked to copy the files to his laptop. When we finished, he sat back and was quiet for a moment. "You hunt on the national forest?" he asked. "Sometimes, mostly on my own property." "You know anyone who's gone missing from that area recently?" Missing? I asked. No. Why? He pulled out his phone and showed me a flyer. Missing hiker. 26-year-old man named Ryan Fuller. Last seen September 5th on the Timms Hill Trail, about 6 miles from my property. He'd been hiking solo, didn't return to his car. Search and rescue had been looking for him for a week. He was wearing a blue backpack, Peterson said. I felt cold. That's the backpack in the photos. Probably. He closed his phone. We've had 3 missing hikers in this area in the last year, all experienced, all vanished without a trace. We find their gear sometimes, scattered in the woods like it was placed there deliberately, but we never find them. What do you think it is? I asked. He didn't answer right away, just looked at the screen showing that final image, the person in blaze orange waving at the camera. Off the record, he said, the Ojibwe call them Wendigo. Wendigo. Different tribes have different names, but the pattern's the same, something that hunts in the deep woods. Something that can look almost human, and something that collects people. Collects? I said. It takes them, he said quietly, and then it wears them for a while, wears their appearance, their clothes, walks the trails where other people will see it, like bait. Jesus, I whispered. I'm recommending you don't hunt your property this season, he said, and I'm flagging this area for increased patrols. We'll put up some warning signs about the missing hiker, tell people to avoid solo hiking, but between you and me, he looked at me seriously, don't go in those woods alone. Don't go in after dark, and if you see someone on your property who doesn't belong there, don't approach them. Call 911 immediately. What about the camera? I asked. Should I pull it? Leave it, he said, but don't check it yourself. Give me the GPS coordinates. I'll have someone check it from now on. Someone who's prepared. I gave him the coordinates. He left around 10 a.m. I watched his truck drive away, and then I went around my property pulling every other camera. I wasn't going to have those things recording whatever was out there. The 6th camera could stay up. The DNR could deal with it. That was 3 weeks ago. I haven't been back into the woods since. I've been hunting on a friend's property 20 miles away. Different forest, different area, somewhere that feels safer. But last week, something happened that's got me thinking about leaving Wisconsin altogether. I was in town getting groceries. Coming out of the store, I saw someone across the parking lot, tall guy in a flannel shirt and blaze orange cap. He was just standing there by a pickup truck, watching the store entrance. He looked familiar. Took me a second to place where I'd seen him. He looked exactly like the person in that final trail camera image. Same clothes, same posture, same slightly wrong proportions. I stood there frozen, grocery bags in hand. He was maybe 50 yards away, close enough to see clearly, close enough to notice details. And the details were wrong. The arms were just slightly too long. The head tilted at an angle that wasn't quite natural. And the smile, that same approximation of a human smile. He waved at me, slow and deliberate, just like he'd waved at my camera. I dropped my groceries and got in my truck, locked the doors, started the engine. When I looked back at where he'd been standing, he was gone. The pickup truck was still there, but he'd vanished. I drove home going 20 over the speed limit, kept checking my rearview mirror the whole way, expecting to see that truck following me, but the road stayed empty. I called Warden Peterson as soon as I got home, told him what I'd seen. He didn't sound surprised. "It knows you," he said. "You checked that camera. You saw it, and now it knows your face." "What do I do?" I asked. "You leave," he said simply. "You move somewhere else. Change your routine. Make yourself harder to find, because whatever that thing is, it's patient, and it doesn't forget. So that's what I'm doing. I'm selling my property, moving south, maybe Tennessee or Kentucky, somewhere far from these woods, somewhere that thing isn't. But here's what keeps me up at night. Ryan Fuller, the missing hiker, They found his car last week, still parked at the trailhead where he'd left it, and sitting on the hood was his blue backpack, empty except for a note written in shaky handwriting. It said, "I'm okay. Don't look for me. I'm staying out here." But the handwriting didn't match Ryan's. The Forest Service checked, and when they processed the backpack for fingerprints, they found something strange. The prints were human, but they had 6 fingers instead of 5. Whatever wrote that note wasn't Ryan. It was wearing Ryan, and it's still out there, walking those trails, looking almost human enough to pass. Almost human enough to wave at lost hikers and offer to help them find the trail. Almost human enough until you really look at it. If you hunt in Wisconsin, if you hike in the Chequamegon-Nicolet National Forest, pay attention to the people you meet on the trail. Really look at them, check their proportions, watch how they move, because something in those woods has learned to copy us, and it's getting better at it. Don't hike alone. Don't camp in isolated areas. And if someone waves at you from the tree line, if someone offers to show you a shortcut back to your car, check their eyes first. Because the eyes are always wrong, always reflecting light in a way human eyes don't. I'm sharing this because I can't stop thinking about those missing hikers. 3 in the last year. How many more before them? How many people walked into those woods and met something wearing a friendly face? How many of them followed it deeper into the trees, thinking they were being helped? If you've experienced something similar, if you've seen someone on the trail who didn't look quite right, share your story. People need to know what's out there. People need to know not everyone in the woods is human. And if you run trail cameras, check your footage carefully. Really look at what your cameras capture at night, because you might find something you weren't expecting. Something that's been watching your property. Something that now knows you exist. Stay safe out there. Hunt in groups. Trust your instincts. And if your dogs start barking at something in the tree line, trust them. They can sense things we can't. Things that know how to look almost human but can never quite hide what they really are. My daughter made a new friend at school. That's what she told me. But kids don't live in storm drains. I'm Austin, 34 years old, single dad to my daughter Emma, who just turned 7. We moved to Flagstaff, Arizona last June, 2024, after my divorce finalized. Fresh start, new job, new schools. Emma took it hard at first. New city, new house, no friends yet. She was lonely. So, when she started talking about her new friend in September, I was relieved. I figured she'd met someone at school, maybe a neighbor kid. I didn't ask too many questions. I was just glad she seemed happier. The first time she mentioned him was September 4th, a Wednesday. I picked her up from school and we were walking back to our house. We lived in an older neighborhood, houses from the 60s and 70s, big trees, quiet streets, good place for kids. Emma was quiet on the walk, which wasn't unusual. She's a shy kid. But then she stopped at the corner of our street, right next to a storm drain, one of those big concrete ones with the metal grate on top. "That's where my friend lives," she said, pointing at the drain. I smiled. "You mean nearby?" "No," she said. "In there. Kids say weird things." I didn't think much of it. Maybe she'd seen a cat or a raccoon near the drain, made up a story about it. I used to do the same thing when I was her age. "What's your friend's name?" I asked as we kept walking. "He didn't tell me yet," Emma said. "But he knows my name. He told me I'm very pretty." That made me pause. "When did you talk to him?" "This morning, on the way to school. He called me from the drain and asked me to come closer so he could see me better." I stopped walking. "Emma, did you go near the drain?" "No," she said quickly. "You told me not to go near the street drains because of flash floods." I stayed on the sidewalk. "Good girl," I said, but something about the conversation bothered me. A voice calling from a storm drain, asking my daughter to come closer. That evening, after Emma was in bed, I walked back to that corner, brought a flashlight, checked the storm drain. It was just a drainage grate, maybe 3 feet by 3 feet, covering a concrete culvert that ran under the street. The opening was dark. I shined my light down into it, saw water at the bottom, maybe 4 feet down, leaves and debris, nothing unusual. I told myself Emma had an active imagination. Maybe she'd heard water echoing in the drain, thought it sounded like a voice. Kids do that. They anthropomorphize everything. But I made a mental note to talk to her about stranger danger again. Even if it was just her imagination, I needed to make sure she understood not to talk to strangers, real or imagined. The next morning, Thursday, I walked Emma to school. When we passed the storm drain, she stopped and waved at it. "Good morning," she called toward the grate. I didn't hear anything in response, but Emma tilted her head like she was listening. "He says good morning to you too, Daddy," she said. "Emma, there's nobody in there," I said gently. "Yes, there is," she insisted. "He's right there. Can't you see him?" I looked at the drain, bent down to Emma's level, trying to see what she was seeing. Just darkness, and the metal grate, and the sound of water trickling somewhere below. "What does he look like?" I asked. Emma thought about it. "He's tall, and he has really long arms, and his smile is really big." "Is he a person or an animal?" I asked. "A person," Emma said, "but he says he can be an animal too if he wants to." That same cold feeling I'd had the night before came back. Something was wrong about this, but I couldn't figure out what. Was Emma making this up? Had she seen something that scared her and was processing it through play? Was there actually someone hiding in the drainage system? I called the city utilities department that morning from work, told them I was concerned someone might be living in the storm drains in my neighborhood. They said they'd send someone to check it out. That afternoon, I picked Emma up from school early and we went to her favorite ice cream place. While we were eating, I tried to talk to her about her friend. "Emma, you know you can tell me anything, right?" I said. "If someone at school is bothering you, or if you saw something that scared you." "I'm not scared," she said. "My friend is nice. He tells me stories." "What kind of stories?" "About the desert, about the animals, about the old people who used to live here before houses." She licked her ice cream. "He knows lots of things." "Has anyone else seen your friend?" I asked. "Your teacher? Other kids?" Emma shook her head. "He only talks to me. He says I'm special." Every parent alarm I had was screaming now, a voice in a drain, telling my daughter she's special, asking her to come closer, stories about the area, which suggested local knowledge. This was sounding less like imagination and more like grooming behavior. I called the Flagstaff Police non-emergency line that evening, explained the situation. They said they'd increase patrols in the area and send an officer to check the storm drains. Officer Santiago came by the next day, Friday afternoon. Young guy, maybe late 20s, seemed competent, and actually listened instead of dismissing me. "You think someone's living in the drainage system?" he asked. "I don't know," I said. "My daughter says she hears a voice. She's 7. She might be making it up, but I'd rather be paranoid than sorry." He nodded. "Smart. Let me check it out." We walked to the corner together. Officer Santiago had a high-powered flashlight. He knelt by the drain and shined the light down into it, moving the beam systematically across the visible area. "It's just a catch basin," he said. "Drops down about 4 feet, then connects to a 12-inch pipe that runs under the street. Nobody could fit in there. Maybe a kid could squeeze into the basin itself, but they couldn't go any further." "Could someone be inside the basin?" I asked. "Hiding when they see someone coming?" He shined his light at a different angle. "The basin's only about 3 feet wide. I can see the whole thing from here. It's empty except for water and leaves." He stood up and looked at the surrounding area. "But I'll tell you what concerns me. We've had reports lately of someone in this neighborhood approaching kids. Not touching them, not threatening them, just talking to them, asking questions, learning about them. We haven't been able to identify who it is because the descriptions don't match. Some kids say it's a man, some say it's a woman, different heights, different ages. The only consistent thing is they always approach near storm drains or the irrigation canal." "Why near water?" I asked. He shrugged. Could be random, could be strategic, gives them an escape route if someone comes, could be psychological. Kids playing near water, their parents aren't watching as closely. He looked at me seriously. Keep your daughter away from this area. Walk her to and from school. Don't let her play outside unsupervised. And if she mentions this friend again, try to get more details, physical description, exactly what they're saying, anything that could help us identify them. I thanked him and went back home. Emma was with our neighbor, Mrs. Chen, who sometimes watched her when I had to work late. I told her about the situation, asked her to be extra vigilant. That weekend, I kept Emma close. We went to the movies, the park, the library, normal dad-daughter stuff. But I was watching her, trying to see if she seemed anxious or scared or if her behavior changed. She seemed fine, happy even, more talkative than she'd been in months. Sunday evening, we were making dinner together when she said something that made me drop the knife I was holding. My friend told me he used to be like me, she said, stirring the pasta sauce. A long time ago. But then he changed. He said change is important. Changed how? I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. He didn't say exactly, but he said sometimes people need to become something else to survive, like how caterpillars become butterflies. Did he say he was a butterfly? I asked. Emma laughed. No, Daddy, that was just an example. He said he's something that doesn't have a name in English, but the old people who lived here knew what he was. They had rules about him. What rules? I asked. Don't go near him when the sun goes down. Don't tell him your real name. Don't accept gifts from him. Don't let him into your house. She looked up at me. But I already told him my name. Is that bad? My hands were shaking. Emma, where did you hear all this? He told me. In the drain. He talks really quiet, so I have to get close to hear him. She went back to stirring the sauce. But don't worry, Daddy. I didn't accept any gifts. He offered me a pretty rock, but I said no thank you. I texted Officer Santiago immediately, told him everything Emma had just said. He called me back 5 minutes later. Mr. Harrison, I need you to listen carefully, he said. His voice was different now, not casual, urgent. What your daughter is describing. The rules, the changing, the connection to indigenous history. That's not coming from a person hiding in a drain. That's something else. What do you mean something else? I asked. There's a cultural liaison officer I work with sometimes. He said, Dr. Yazzie, from the Navajo Nation. She consults on cases involving traditional beliefs. I'm going to give her your number. I think you need to talk to her. I don't understand, I said. You think this is some kind of... I think your daughter is talking to a skinwalker, he said flatly. And if that's true, you need to take this very seriously. Dr. Yazzie called me an hour later. We talked for 45 minutes. She asked detailed questions about Emma's descriptions, the location of the drain, when the conversations happened, what exactly was said. The storm drain is a threshold space, she explained, between above ground and below, between light and dark, between your world and theirs. Skinwalkers use threshold spaces. They can reach through them in ways they can't in open areas. You're saying this is real? I asked. Not just folklore? Does it matter? She replied. Your daughter is talking to something that knows our old stories, something that's trying to build trust with her. Something that's teaching her to come closer, to ignore safety rules, to keep secrets. Whether you believe in skinwalkers or not, the behavior pattern is the same. Something is grooming your child. What do I do? I asked. She was quiet for a moment. The traditional protections won't work if you don't believe in them, but you need to do 3 things immediately. First, your daughter cannot go near that drain ever again. Change your route to school. Tell her the drain is dangerous. Make up any excuse, but she can't go back there. Second, you need to put something over that drain. Cover it, block it, make it inaccessible. The city won't like it, but do it anyway. Third, you need to consider moving. If a skinwalker has chosen your daughter, it won't stop because you asked it to. You need distance. We just moved here, I said. I can't just move again. Then you need to be very careful, she said. Watch for signs it's following her. Watch for mimicry. If someone at school suddenly knows things only you and Emma would know. Watch for gifts appearing in your yard. Watch for sounds outside your house at night. And most importantly, watch your daughter's behavior. If she starts saying she wants to go to the desert alone, or asking to spend time near water, or saying she wants to change, that means it's getting closer to taking her. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed listening to every sound in the house, every creak, every settling noise, every gust of wind against the windows. Around 2 a.m., I heard something that made me sit bolt upright. A voice outside Emma's window, quiet, almost singing. I couldn't make out words, but it sounded like a lullaby. I grabbed my gun from the lockbox and ran to Emma's room. She was asleep, her window was closed and locked, but when I looked outside, I saw someone standing at the edge of our yard. Tall and thin, wearing what looked like a long, dark coat, just standing there, looking up at Emma's window. I called 911. By the time Officer Santiago arrived 10 minutes later, the figure was gone, but there were marks in the grass where something had been standing, not footprints. Long gouges, like something with claws had been dragging its feet. You need to leave tonight, Officer Santiago said. Pack a bag. Take your daughter somewhere else. A hotel, a friend's house, somewhere that thing doesn't know about. I can't run every time, I started. Yes, you can, he interrupted. And you will, because that's what keeps your daughter safe. We left that night, drove to Phoenix, checked into a hotel near my sister's place. Emma cried because I wouldn't tell her why we were leaving so suddenly. I told her it was a surprise mini-vacation. We stayed in Phoenix for a week. I worked remotely. Emma missed school. But we were safe. No voices, no figures in the yard, nothing. When we came back to Flagstaff, the first thing I did was hire someone to weld a steel plate over that storm drain. The city sent me a violation notice. I paid the fine and told them I'd fight it in court. I didn't care. Emma asked about her friend several times, asked why we weren't walking past his house anymore. I told her we had a new route to school now, that it was safer. She seemed sad but accepted it. For a few weeks, everything was normal. Then in October, Emma came home from school and said something that made my blood run cold. My friend has a new house, she said. He moved. He's at the school now. What do you mean at the school? I asked. In the drain by the playground. He said he moved so we could still talk. He missed me. I called the principal immediately. Went to the school. Checked the storm drains near the playground. They were smaller than the one near our house. Just 6-inch openings in the curb for runoff. Nothing a person could hide in. But Emma insisted that's where her friend was now. She'd been talking to him during recess, she said, standing near the drain, chatting with whatever was down there. The principal agreed to block off the drains during recess, said they'd mark them as a safety hazard. But that night, Emma's behavior changed. She refused to eat dinner, just sat at the table staring at her plate. What's wrong? I asked. He's angry, she said quietly. He said I'm being mean to him. He said friends don't block each other out. He wants me to prove I'm still his friend. Emma, that's not your friend, I said. Real friends don't get angry when you have other things to do. Real friends don't ask you to prove anything. But I miss him, she said. And when she looked up at me, her eyes were different, distant, like she was looking through me instead of at me. He tells me important things. He says I could be special like him if I wanted to. He says change doesn't hurt if you don't fight it. I pulled her out of school the next day, called Dr. Yazzie again. She drove up from the reservation that afternoon and met with us. She brought something with her, a small leather pouch with herbs and something that smelled like sage. She told Emma it was a gift from the old people, that it would protect her from bad dreams. She tied it around Emma's neck on a leather cord. Don't take this off, Dr. Yazzie told her. Even when you sleep, even when you bathe, this keeps bad things away. Emma touched the pouch. Will it keep my friend away? Yes, Dr. Yazzie said. I know you miss your friend, but your friend isn't what he seems, and he's trying to take you somewhere you can't come back from. Emma started crying. Not sad crying, angry crying. You don't understand. He's the only one who understands me. He's the only one who knows what it's like to be different. Different how? Dr. Yazzie asked gently. To not fit, to be alone, to want to be something else. Emma was screaming now, tears streaming down her face. He says I could be with him. He says I could be free. He says I don't have to be just Emma anymore. I grabbed her and held her while she cried and fought against me. Dr. Yazzie stayed calm, just watched, waited for Emma to exhaust herself. When Emma finally went limp in my arms, Dr. Yazzie said quietly, It's in her already. Not all the way, but it started the process, the attachment, the erosion of self. We need to break it now or you'll lose her. How? I asked. She can't hear its voice anymore, Dr. Yazzie said, which means you need to leave Flagstaff. Go somewhere it can't follow, somewhere with no connection to this land. We left the next week. I quit my job, broke my lease, loaded everything we owned into a truck and drove east. We ended up in North Carolina, as far from Arizona as I could get and still find work. Emma cried for the first 3 days of the drive, kept asking to go back, kept saying her friend needed her, but the further we got from Flagstaff, the less she mentioned it. By the time we crossed into Texas, she'd stopped asking entirely. Now, 6 months later, she seems normal again. She made real friends at her new school. She laughs, she plays. She doesn't mention the voice in the drain anymore. But sometimes at night, I hear her talking to her window, just murmuring like she's having a conversation with someone. And once, I heard her tell the window, I know you're far away now, but I still remember you, and I still want to change like you. I installed extra locks on all her windows. I check them every night. I sleep with my door open so I can hear if she gets up. I'm doing everything I can. But I wonder if we got away or if we're just in a waiting period. I wonder if distance matters to something that can reach through drains and speak to children from beneath the ground. I wonder if Emma is truly free or if part of her is still connected to whatever was down there, waiting for her to be old enough to find her way back. I'm sharing this because other parents need to know. If your kid starts talking to imaginary friends in strange places, drains, vents, crawl spaces, anywhere dark and enclosed, pay attention. If they start repeating knowledge they shouldn't have, old stories, rules from cultures they've never studied, take it seriously. If they start talking about wanting to change, wanting to be something else, wanting to be free, get them away from that location immediately. Don't assume it's imagination. Don't assume it's a phase. Don't wait to see if it gets worse, because by the time you realize something's wrong, it might already be too late. And if you live in Flagstaff, Arizona, particularly in the older neighborhoods near the university, check your storm drains. Really look at them. And if you hear something echoing up from below, something that sounds almost like a voice, walk away. Don't listen. Don't engage. And definitely don't let your children get close. Because something down there is hungry for company, and it knows how to be patient. If this sounds familiar, if your kid has mentioned friends in strange places, share your story in the comments. Let other parents know what to watch for, because these things rely on secrecy. They rely on us dismissing it as imagination. The more people who know, the harder it is for them to operate. Keep your kids close, trust your instincts, and never, ever assume those imaginary friends are harmless. I spent 3 months alone in a fire lookout tower in Idaho, and I never saw another human being the entire time, but I wasn't alone. My name's Graham. I'm 28, worked seasonal jobs for the Forest Service since college, wilderness trail crew mostly, sometimes fire suppression. When the lookout position opened up at Copper Ridge in the Bitterroot Range, I jumped at it. 3 months of solitude, June through August 2024, living in a tower at 8,000 feet elevation, nothing but mountains, trees, and sky. Paradise for someone like me who never fit well with people anyway. The tower was built in the 1930s, 14 by 14-foot cabin on top of a 40-foot steel frame, accessible only by a metal staircase that wrapped around the outside. The cabin was simple: a bed, a desk, propane stove, wood stove for heat, and a 360-degree view through windows that wrapped all 4 walls. On the desk was the Osborne Firefinder, a circular map with a sighting device for pinpointing smoke locations, radio for reporting fires and checking in with dispatch, solar panels for power, propane tanks for cooking and the backup generator, water collected from rain and snowmelt, everything I needed to survive alone for a full season. The Forest Service ranger who hiked up with me on June 3rd was a guy named Holloway, maybe 50 years old, lean and weathered from decades in the backcountry. He helped me carry supplies up the final 2 miles from where the truck trail ended. When we reached the tower, he gave me the standard orientation: how to use the firefinder, radio protocols, what to do in lightning storms, emergency procedures. Then he said something I didn't understand at the time. "You're going to see things up here," he told me, "especially at night. Shadows moving in the trees, sounds you can't identify, maybe voices calling from the forest. Don't go looking for them, don't answer them, and whatever you do, don't invite anything into this tower." I figured he was hazing the new guy, trying to spook me with ghost stories. I laughed it off. He didn't laugh. "I'm serious, Graham. This mountain has occupants. They don't bother you if you follow the rules. Stay in the tower after dark. Keep the doors locked. Don't acknowledge them. They'll test you, especially the first few weeks. They need to know if you're going to be a problem." "What kind of occupants?" I asked. He looked out at the forest surrounding the tower, miles of lodgepole pine and fir, stretching in every direction. "The kind that were here before this tower was built. The kind that don't like being watched." Then he left, hiked back down the mountain. I watched him disappear into the trees and realized I was completely alone. No cell service, no internet, just me, the radio, and 3 months of isolation. The first 2 weeks were perfect. I settled into the routine. Wake at dawn, scan the horizon for smoke, make coffee, read, scan again, eat lunch, scan again, make dinner, watch the sunset, sleep. The weather was clear, no fires. No emergencies, just endless blue sky and the sound of wind through the pines. At night, I'd sit at the windows and watch the stars. Up here, away from any light pollution, the Milky Way was so bright it cast shadows. I'd never seen anything like it. I felt more at peace than I had in years. Then on June 19th, things started happening. I was sitting at the desk around 11 p.m., writing in my journal by lamplight. The windows were open because it was warm, just screens between me and the night air. I heard something on the stairs. Footsteps, slow and deliberate, coming up the metal staircase that wrapped around the tower. I grabbed my flashlight and went to the door, looked through the small window. The staircase was visible in the moonlight, winding down and around the tower structure. Nobody there, but I could still hear the footsteps, metal clanging under weight, coming closer. The sound reached the top of the stairs, right outside my door, then stopped. I stood there with my flashlight, waiting. Nothing. No knock, no voice, just silence and the wind. After 5 minutes, I opened the door and checked. The small landing outside was empty. I shined my light down the staircase. Nothing. Nobody. I went back inside and locked the door. Tried to convince myself it was thermal expansion in the metal, temperature changes making the steel frame creak and pop in a way that sounded like footsteps. That made sense. Except thermal expansion doesn't stop right outside your door. The next morning, I radioed dispatch and mentioned it. The dispatcher, a woman named Carol, asked if I'd check the base of the tower. "For what?" I asked. "Tracks," she said. "If something was on the stairs, there should be tracks in the dirt at the bottom." I climbed down after breakfast and checked. The ground at the base of the tower was soft pine needles and dirt, easy to see prints. I saw my own boot prints from yesterday. I saw what looked like deer tracks from some time overnight, but I didn't see anything that suggested a person or large animal had climbed the stairs. That should have made me feel better. It didn't. 3 days later, June 22nd, I heard voices. It was around 2 a.m. I was asleep when something woke me. At first I thought it was the wind, then I realized it was words, people talking. Multiple voices, maybe 3 or 4, having a conversation somewhere below the tower. I got up and looked out the windows. The forest floor was about 40 feet below, dark except for patches of moonlight through the trees. I couldn't see anyone, but I could hear them clearly. The voices were calm, conversational. I couldn't make out specific words, just the rhythm and cadence of people talking. Then one of the voices called my name. Graham, clear as day. My name, in a voice I almost recognized but couldn't quite place. Graham, come down. We need your help. I stood at the window, frozen. Every instinct told me not to answer. I remembered what Holloway had said. Don't acknowledge them. Graham, please. We're lost. The voice sounded distressed now, desperate, like someone who'd been wandering in the dark for hours and finally found help. I picked up my radio and called dispatch. Carol answered immediately. Dispatch. This is Copper Ridge, I said. I'm hearing voices outside the tower. Multiple people, claiming they're lost. Should I investigate? There was a long pause. Then Carol's voice came back, serious and measured. Copper Ridge, stay in the tower. Do not go outside. Do not acknowledge the voices. Confirm you copy. Copy, I said. But if someone's actually lost out there. They're not, Carol interrupted. We have no missing persons reports. No registered hikers in your area. Nobody should be anywhere near that tower. What you're hearing isn't people. Stay inside. Confirm. Confirmed, I said. Staying inside. Good, she said. Keep your radio on. I'll stay on this channel until the voices stop. I sat at the desk with the radio, listening to both Carol's occasional status checks and the voices outside. The voices continued for another 20 minutes, sometimes calling my name, sometimes talking amongst themselves, sometimes sounding like they were arguing, sometimes laughing. Then, just before 3 a.m., they stopped, not gradually, just stopped, like someone had flipped a switch. They're gone, I told Carol. Good, she said. You did the right thing. Get some sleep. We'll talk more in the morning. But I didn't sleep. I sat at the windows watching the forest until dawn, wondering what the hell I'd heard. The next day, Carol explained over the radio that the Copper Ridge Tower had a history. 3 previous lookouts had reported similar experiences. One of them, back in 1998, had gone down to investigate voices and never came back. His body was found 2 weeks later about a mile from the tower, cause of death listed as exposure. But there were things about the scene that didn't make sense. His gear was neatly arranged in a circle around his body. His boots were missing, and his face. Carol didn't want to give me details, but apparently his face had been described in the report as worn. Worn how? I asked. Like a mask that had been put on and taken off too many times, she said quietly. That's how the ranger described it, like his face was a costume that didn't fit quite right anymore. Jesus, I whispered. The tribes in this area have stories about things in the mountains, Carol continued. Things that can mimic human voices, things that hunt by creating false distress signals. The Forest Service doesn't officially acknowledge any of that, but off the record, we tell every lookout the same thing Holloway told you. Stay inside after dark. Don't answer the voices. Don't go looking for things you hear. For a week after that, nothing happened. I started to relax, started to think maybe the voices had been a one-time thing, some weird acoustic phenomenon, wildlife sounds that my brain misinterpreted in the middle of the night. Then, on June 30th, I saw it. I was doing my afternoon scan with binoculars, checking the ridgelines for smoke. The weather had been hot and dry, and lightning strikes were forecasting for the evening. I was sweeping slowly across the northern sector when something moved in my peripheral vision. I swung the binoculars down to the tree line about 200 yards from the tower. A figure was standing at the edge of the forest. Tall, very tall, maybe 7 feet, dark. It was hard to tell details because it was in shadow under the trees, but I could see it was roughly human-shaped, standing upright on 2 legs. I focused the binoculars. The figure was wearing what looked like a coat or cloak made of dark fur or leather, but the proportions were wrong. The arms hung too low, past where knees should be. The head was too small for the body, or maybe it didn't have a head at all, just a smooth dome where a head should be. As I watched, it took a step forward into a patch of sunlight, and that's when I saw its face. It was my face, not similar. Not approximate. My exact face, down to the scar on my left eyebrow from a hiking accident 3 years ago. My face attached to that too tall body with the wrong proportions and the arms that hung like an ape's. I dropped the binoculars. When I looked with naked eyes, the figure was gone. I picked up the binoculars again, scanned the tree line frantically. Nothing, just trees and shadow and sunlight. I radioed Carol immediately, told her what I'd seen. There was another long pause. "Did it see you?" she asked. "I think so. It was standing in the open, facing the tower." "Damn," she muttered. "Okay, new protocol. From now on, sleep during the day, stay awake at night, keep all the windows shuttered except one for fire watch. And Graham," she paused, "if you see it again, especially if you see it wearing your face, you need to leave. Hike down to the truck trail and wait there. We'll send someone to get you." "I can't abandon the tower during fire season," I said. "Yes, you can," she said firmly. "Your life is more important than this tower. The thing you saw, if it's mimicking you, that means it's studying you, learning you. And that means it's planning something." "Planning what?" I asked. "To replace you," she said. That night, I followed protocol, shuttered all the windows except the north-facing one I needed for fire watch, set up my sleeping bag on the floor near the desk so I could rest during the day and stay alert at night, made sure all doors were locked, even though I was 40 feet off the ground. Around midnight, I heard something on the roof. Not footsteps, something heavier, something moving across the wooden shingles above my head. Slowly, deliberately, like it was testing the weight, looking for weak spots. I grabbed my flashlight and looked up at the ceiling. The wooden beams and planks that formed the roof were visible, solid and old. I could hear whatever was up there moving toward the center of the roof, right above where I was standing. Then it started scratching, long, dragging sounds, claws on wood, moving in circles, spiraling outward from the center, the same pattern over and over. I could see dust and small splinters falling from the ceiling boards as whatever was up there carved into them. I radioed Carol. She told me to stay calm, stay inside, keep the doors locked, said she'd have a ranger start hiking up at first light, but it would take them 5 hours to reach me. The scratching continued for 3 hours, slow and patient, never stopping, just constant dragging sounds above my head, getting deeper, cutting through the wood. At 3 a.m., it stopped. I heard whatever it was move back toward the edge of the roof, then silence. I didn't move from my position at the desk, just sat there with my flashlight and my knife, watching the ceiling, waiting for dawn. When the sun came up at 5:30 a.m., I finally climbed the small ladder to the roof access hatch, pushed it open carefully and looked out. The roof was covered in scratches, deep gouges in the wooden shingles, arranged in a spiral pattern that started at the center and radiated outward. In the middle of the spiral was a symbol carved into the wood. The same symbol I'd seen in reports from the other towers, a circle with radiating lines, a crude stick figure inside. And around the edge of the roof, evenly spaced, were footprints, not human footprints, something with claws and pads, like a large canine, but the spacing was wrong. The gate was too wide. Whatever made these prints had legs that were far too long. I climbed back down and sealed the hatch, sat at my desk and waited for the ranger to arrive. Holloway showed up around 10 a.m. He climbed the stairs, knocked once, and I let him in. He took one look at my face and nodded. "You saw it," he said. It wasn't a question. "It had my face," I said. He nodded again. "They do that. Copy the person who's isolated. The person who's alone." "Transition to what?" I asked. "To becoming you," Holloway said. He went to the window and looked out at the forest. "The Skinwalker. That's what the tribes call it, though there are other names. It needs to understand its prey completely before it takes them. It watches, it listens, it studies. And when it knows everything about you, when it can mimic your voice and face perfectly, that's when it makes its move." "What move?" I asked, though I was afraid I already knew. "It tries to become you," he said quietly. "Tries to take your place, your life, your identity. And to do that, the real you has to disappear." "I want to leave," I said. "I know," Holloway said. "And you can. But if you leave, it'll follow you. It's marked you now. The symbol on the roof, that's a claiming mark. It's saying you belong to it." "So what do I do?" I asked. Holloway pulled something from his pack, a small leather pouch, similar to the one Dr. Yazzie had given to Emma in my last story. Inside were herbs, something that looked like bone fragments, and a small piece of obsidian. "You stay here," he said. "You finish the season. You don't run, because if you run, you're prey, and it will hunt you. But if you stay, if you hold your ground, you show it you're not afraid. You show it you can't be taken." "That's insane," I said. "Maybe," he admitted, "but running is worse. I've seen what happens to lookouts who abandon their towers because of skinwalkers. They end up dead in the woods within a month. Every single time. Something about running triggers the hunt, but the ones who stay, who finish their season, who refuse to be scared off, they survive." He hung the pouch above the door and told me to never take it down. Said it was protection from the Nez Perce tribe, blessed by their medicine people specifically for this tower. Said it wouldn't keep the Skinwalker away completely, but it would keep it from getting inside. Then he left, hiked back down the mountain, left me alone again. The next 8 weeks were the longest of my life. Every night, something happened. Footsteps on the stairs, voices calling my name, scratching on the walls, sounds on the roof. Sometimes I'd wake up to find my boots moved, even though I'd locked the door and no one could have gotten in. Sometimes I'd find symbols drawn in the dust on the windows. Sometimes I'd see my own face staring at me from the tree line, attached to that too tall body with the wrong arms. But I stayed. I followed the rules. I didn't answer the voices. I didn't go outside after dark. I didn't acknowledge what I saw. And slowly, over the course of July and August, the activity decreased. The visits became less frequent, the voices quieter, like whatever was out there was losing interest, or maybe just waiting. On August 31st, my last day in the tower, Holloway hiked up to help me pack out. We loaded my gear and started the 2-mile hike to the truck trail. I didn't look back at the tower. Didn't want to see if anything was watching. We were about halfway to the truck when Holloway stopped and pointed at the ground. "Look," he said. In the soft dirt of the trail were tracks, big canine prints with claws, following the trail toward the tower. Recent, probably from that morning. "It knew you were leaving," Holloway said. "Came to watch you go." I felt cold despite the warm August sun. "Is it following us now?" He shook his head. "No. You're done. You finished the season. You held your ground. Far as it's concerned, you're not interesting anymore. You're not prey." "What about the next lookout?" I asked. Holloway smiled grimly. "They'll get the same briefing you did. same warnings, same protection pouch, and hopefully they'll be smart enough to listen. I never went back to that tower. I took a trail crew position on the other side of the state for the rest of the season. Desk job for the Forest Service now. I'm done with remote assignments, done with isolation, done with places where things can watch you from the trees without being seen. But I think about that tower sometimes, about whatever was out there in the forest, wearing my face, trying to figure out how to become me. I think about the spiral carved into the roof, the claiming mark, the footprints that followed the trail, and I wonder if it's still there, still watching the tower, still waiting for the next person to spend 3 months alone at 8,000 feet, still practicing its mimicry, still perfecting its copy of whatever poor bastard gets assigned there next. If you ever take a fire lookout job in Idaho, in the Bitterroot Range, at a place called Copper Ridge, read the station log carefully. Look for notes from previous lookouts. Look for warnings written in margins. Look for the dates when people reported strange activity. And if you find a leather pouch hanging above the door, don't take it down. Don't question it. Don't throw it away because it looks superstitious or old-fashioned. Keep it there. Keep the doors locked at night. Don't answer voices. Don't investigate sounds. Don't go looking for things you see moving in the trees. Because up there, you're not alone. You're being watched. You're being studied. And something is deciding whether you're worth copying, whether your face would fit better on its body than your own. Stay vigilant. Follow the old rules. Trust the protection that previous lookouts left behind. And finish your season. Because running is worse than staying. Running means you're prey. And if you've worked fire lookout towers, if you've experienced things you can't explain, if you've heard voices calling your name from forests that should be empty, share your story. Let other people know what they're getting into, because the Forest Service won't tell you the truth. They'll give you the radio protocols and the firefighter training and the emergency procedures, but they won't tell you about the things that live in the spaces between trees, the things that have been there longer than any tower, the things that see isolated humans as opportunities. Know what you're signing up for, know the real risks, and decide if 3 months of solitude is worth 3 months of being hunted. For me, it wasn't worth it, but I survived, and if you follow the rules, you can too. Just don't run. Whatever you do, don't run. I worked the overnight shift at a truck stop on Route 117 Inches, Nevada, and last month something came through that wasn't human. It paid for gas with cash. It knew how to smile. And it drove away in a Ford pickup with Colorado plates. My name's Vincent. I'm 41. Been working this gas station for 6 years. It's one of those places that exists because there's nothing else around. 50 miles from the nearest town in either direction, serving truckers and the occasional tourist who didn't plan their fuel stops correctly. We're open 24 hours. During the day, my coworker Rita handles things. At night, it's just me, from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. The station sits at the intersection of Route 117 and an old mining road that doesn't go anywhere anymore. Used to lead to a silver mine back in the 60s, but it's been closed for 40 years. The road's still there, though, just dirt and rocks disappearing into the dark desert. Sometimes people turn down it by mistake. Usually they come back within a few minutes when they realize it's not going anywhere. October 7th, 2024, was a Monday night. Slow evening. I'd had maybe 3 customers all night. A trucker around 11, a couple in an RV around 1 a.m., another trucker around 3. Between customers, I read, organized the cooler, checked the pumps, standard overnight shift stuff. At 4:15 a.m., a vehicle pulled up to pump number 3. I could see it on the security monitor behind the counter. Ford F-150, dark blue or black, hard to tell in the overhead lights. Colorado plates, single occupant. They sat in the truck for a moment before getting out. The door opened and someone stepped out. Male, I thought. Tall, wearing jeans, a hoodie, and a baseball cap pulled low. Normal enough. But something about the way he moved caught my attention. The walk was slightly off, not limping, not injured, just mechanical, like someone who was thinking about each step instead of just walking. He started the pump and then walked toward the store. As he got closer to the door, I got a better look at him through the glass. His face was wrong, not deformed, not injured, just wrong. The features were all there, eyes, nose, mouth, but they were arranged in a way that was almost right but not quite. Like someone had been given a description of a human face and did their best to recreate it. The proportions were slightly off, the eyes were a bit too far apart, the mouth was a bit too wide, the nose was a bit too flat, and he wasn't blinking, just staring straight ahead as he walked. No expression, no movement in the face at all. He pushed through the door and the bell chimed. I was standing behind the counter, trying not to stare, trying to act normal. "Evening," I said automatically. He stopped just inside the door, turned his head toward me, still not blinking, still no expression. Then he smiled. It was the worst smile I've ever seen. Too wide, too many teeth visible, held too long, like someone who'd been told that humans smile but didn't understand why or how. "Good evening," he said. His voice was flat, monotone, each word carefully pronounced like he was reading from a script. He walked to the coffee station, poured himself a cup, added cream and sugar with movements that were too precise, too deliberate, picked up a package of beef jerky from the rack, a candy bar, a bottle of water, normal purchases, but the way he selected them, he studied each item carefully, reading the labels completely, as if he'd never seen these products before. He brought everything to the counter, set them down in a perfect line: coffee, jerky, candy bar, water, evenly spaced. "Pump 3, he said. No inflection, just statement of fact. I rang it up. The pump showed $28.40 in fuel. With his other items, the total came to $37.15. He reached into his pocket and pulled out two $20 bills, placed them on the counter. The bills were pristine, uncirculated, like they'd just come from a bank. But more than that, they were placed perfectly parallel to each other, perfectly aligned with the edge of the counter. I gave him his change. He took it without looking at it, stuffed it in his pocket, and picked up his purchases, turned to leave. That's when I noticed his hands. The fingers were too long, not by much, maybe an extra inch on each digit, but enough that it was noticeable, enough that it was wrong. He pushed through the door and walked back to his truck, got in, sat there for a moment. I watched on the security monitor, wondering if he was going to pull away or if something else was about to happen. Then I saw his face in the truck cab, illuminated by the overhead pump lights. He was eating the jerky, or trying to. He'd opened the package and was holding a piece of jerky in his hand, but he was just staring at it, studying it, like he didn't know what to do with it. Then he opened his mouth, and his jaw hinged open far wider than any human jaw should, impossibly wide, and he dropped the entire piece of jerky into his mouth and swallowed it whole without chewing. I grabbed my phone and stepped away from the window. My hands were shaking. I didn't know what I'd just seen, but every instinct was telling me it wasn't human. The truck started up, pulled away from the pump, but instead of turning back toward Route 117, it turned down the old mining road. The headlights disappeared into the darkness of the desert. I waited 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15. The truck didn't come back. At 4:50 a.m., I called my manager Leo, woke him up, told him what happened. "What do you mean his face was wrong?" Leo asked, still half asleep. "I mean the proportions were off, and his jaw, it opened too wide. And he went down the mining road and didn't come back." Leo was quiet for a moment. "Vincent, how much sleep did you get before your shift?" "I'm not hallucinating," I said. "Check the security footage. You'll see what I saw." "All right," he said. "I'll come in early and review it. But if this is some kind of joke—" "It's not," I interrupted. "Something came through here that wasn't human, and it went down that road." I hung up and went back to watching the security monitors. The mining road was visible on the far edge of camera 3. I kept watching, expecting to see headlights coming back, but the road stayed dark. At 5:30 a.m., I saw something that made my blood run cold. On camera 3, at the very edge of the frame where the mining road disappeared into darkness, there was movement, not a vehicle. Something walking, coming back toward the station on foot. It moved in and out of the frame's edge. I could only catch glimpses. Tall, moving on 2 legs, but the gait was wrong. Too long between steps, arms swinging too low. I locked the front door, turned off the outside lights, except the pump lights which I couldn't control, went behind the counter and grabbed the baseball bat we kept for security. The thing got closer, close enough that I could see it more clearly on camera 3. It was naked now. No clothes, no hoodie or jeans or baseball cap. Just bare skin that looked gray in the security camera's night vision, but the proportions were completely different than the person who'd been in the store. This thing was maybe 7 feet tall, thin, arms that hung past its knees, head that was too small for its body. It walked right up to pump number 3, stood there in the light, and I could see its face clearly now. It was my face, not the wrong face it had been wearing before. My face, my exact features, my hairline, my jawline, my nose, everything. Like it had taken the opportunity while pretending to be human to study me through the security cameras and mirror my appearance. It looked directly at camera 3, directly at where it knew I'd be watching, and it smiled, that same too wide smile, too many teeth, held too long. Then it walked toward the station doors. I backed away from the counter, held the bat ready, watched on the monitor as it approached the entrance. It reached the doors, pulled on them. They were locked. It stood there for a moment, then it pressed its face against the glass, that face that was my face, looking inside, looking for me. I stayed behind the counter where it couldn't see me from the door, didn't move, didn't make noise, just held the bat and waited. After what felt like hours but was probably only a few minutes, it stepped back from the door, turned and walked back toward pump number 3, stood there in the light, tilted its head, looking at something. The abandoned Ford F-150, still parked at the pump, the truck it had driven in with. The thing walked around the truck slowly, examining it. Then it opened the door, got in, and sat in the driver's seat. I watched on the monitor as it seemed to study the steering wheel, the dashboard, the controls, like it was trying to remember how to drive. The truck started. The thing had figured out the keys. It backed away from the pump, turned onto the mining road, and drove away, this time going deeper into the desert instead of returning toward the highway. I called Leo back immediately. It came back, I said, but it wasn't in the truck. It was walking. And Leo, it had my face. It copied my face somehow. "Vincent, I'm coming in now," Leo said. "Don't open the doors. Don't go outside. Just stay inside until I get there." He arrived at 6:30, just as my shift was ending. We reviewed the security footage together, all of it. The person arriving in the truck, the person inside buying coffee and jerky, the truck turning down the mining road, the thing walking back. All of it was clear on the recordings. "Jesus Christ," Leo whispered as we watched the thing press its face against the door, the face that looked exactly like mine. "What the hell is that?" "I don't know," I said, "but it took someone's truck, someone from Colorado, and now it's somewhere out in the desert, and it knows how to drive." Leo called the Nevada Highway Patrol. They came out that afternoon, took statements, reviewed the footage. They were skeptical at first, thought it might be some kind of elaborate prank. But the footage was clear, and when they went to check the mining road, they found something that changed their minds. About 2 miles down the road, in a cleared area that used to be a staging ground for the mine, they found a truck, same Ford F-150 from the video, empty, keys still in the ignition. But the interior was covered in blood, the seats, the steering wheel, the dashboard, all blood, fresh blood, and in the bed of the truck, neatly folded, were the clothes from the video, the hoodie, the jeans, the baseball cap, all soaked in blood. They ran the plates. The truck was registered to a man named Scott Patterson from Boulder, Colorado. They contacted the Boulder police. Scott Patterson had been reported missing 3 days earlier. He'd been driving cross-country, heading for California. His wife said he'd called from somewhere in Nevada, said he was stopping for gas, and she never heard from him again. The last ping from his cell phone was on Route 117, right where our gas station is located. The NHP investigator, a detective named Fuentes, came back to interview me again. This time he wasn't skeptical. "We think Patterson stopped here," he said, "probably middle of the night, and something approached him. We found drag marks leading from the area behind your dumpster toward the mining road, boot marks that transitioned into something else, something with claws." "You think it killed him?" I asked. "I think it took him," Fuentes said. "Took him down that road, and when it came back, it was wearing his shape, wearing his clothes, driving his truck. It came in here to practice being human, to see if it could pass. But it couldn't," I said. "The proportions were wrong, the behavior was wrong." "Yes," Fuentes agreed, "but it's learning. The fact that it came back on foot wearing your face means it's studying, adapting, getting better at mimicry, and that's what worries me." He told me the area around the mining road had a history. The Paiute and Shoshone tribes avoided it, called it a bad place, said things lived there that wore human skin but weren't human underneath. The mining company had reports from the 60s of workers disappearing, always at night, always on the road between the mine and town. The company had shut down partially because of labor issues. Nobody wanted to work there anymore because too many people vanished. "What do I do?" I asked. "That thing knows where I work. It has my face. You carry this," Fuentes said. He handed me a small pouch made of leather. Inside was something that smelled like sage and cedar. "It's from the Shoshone reservation. They bless these for protection. I don't know if you believe in this stuff, but I've seen enough strange things in this state to think it's worth using." I took it, hung it around my neck, tucked it under my shirt. "And you stay aware," Fuentes continued. "If you see that truck again, call 911 immediately. Don't approach it. Don't engage. Just call us. Because if that thing is still practicing, if it's still trying to figure out how to be human, it might come back here. This gas station is the only place for 50 miles. Sooner or later, everything on Route 117 has to stop here." That was 3 weeks ago. I still work the overnight shift. Leo offered to switch me to days, but honestly I want to be here if that thing comes back. I want to see it coming. During the day, there are too many customers, too many people it could mimic, too many chances for it to blend in. At night, it's just me, and if something pulls up to pump 3 and walks in wearing the wrong face, I'll know. I've been watching the security cameras more carefully, studying every customer who comes through, looking for the tells, the proportions that are slightly off, the movements that are too mechanical, the smiles that don't quite work. Last week, a woman came in around 3 a.m. She was normal. Everything about her checked out. She bought cigarettes and a soda, made small talk about the weather, but when she left, I noticed she walked to pump 3, the same pump that thing had used. And when she got in her car, she sat there for a moment, just sat there, looking at the steering wheel, like she was trying to remember how to drive. Then she looked up at camera 3, looked directly at where she knew I'd be watching, and she smiled, that same too wide smile. She drove away heading west on Route 117, toward California, toward cities full of people, places where something that's almost human but not quite could disappear into the crowd. I called Fuentes, gave him her license plate, her description. He said they'd look into it, but there's only so much the highway patrol can do. They can't stop every person who acts slightly strange. They can't check every driver who sits in their car a little too long. And that's what terrifies me. That thing is out there somewhere, learning, practicing, getting better at being human, and every time it stops at a gas station, every time it interacts with someone, it learns a little more. How many gas stations are there between here and California? How many overnight clerks has it practiced on? How many faces has it copied? I'm sharing this because people need to know. If you work overnight at a truck stop, if you're alone on the highway at 4 a.m., if you're the only person between someone and where they're going, pay attention to details. Watch how people move. Watch how they smile. Watch how they handle money and pick up products and interact with normal human objects. Because something is learning to be us, and it's getting better, and by the time you realize the person buying coffee at your counter isn't quite right, it might already be too late. If you've had strange customers late at night, if someone's proportions seemed off, if someone moved just a little bit wrong, share your story in the comments. Let other people know what to watch for, because these things don't just stay in the desert. They travel, they use our highways, they stop at our gas stations, and they're learning. Stay alert, trust your instincts, and if someone's face looks almost right but not quite, if their smile is too wide, if their fingers are too long, don't tell them. Don't let them know you noticed. Just act normal until they leave, then lock the doors and call the police. And keep something protective nearby. I don't care if you believe in traditional medicine or blessings or spiritual protection. When something walks into your store wearing the wrong face, you'll wish you had something more than just a baseball bat, because that thing is still out there, still practicing, still learning how to be human, and sooner or later, it's going to get it right. And when it does, we won't be able to tell the difference anymore. I rent out the basement apartment in my house, and last month I had a tenant who paid 3 months up front in cash. He never made any noise. He never turned on lights, and when I finally went down there to check on him, I found out why. My name's Derek. I'm 46, divorced, own a 3-bedroom house in Durango, Colorado. After my ex-wife moved out 2 years ago, I converted the finished basement into a rental unit to help with the mortgage. Separate entrance, small kitchenette, bathroom, bedroom area. Nothing fancy, but it was private and affordable. I listed it online in September 2024. I got the usual inquiries: college students, seasonal workers, people passing through, but one application stood out. A guy named John Blackwood, no social media presence I could find. No previous rental history, but he offered to pay 3 months up front in cash, no questions asked. Said he worked remotely and traveled a lot. Needed a quiet place to stay when he was in the area. Red flags, I know, but 3 months rent up front was $1,500 I desperately needed, and he seemed polite enough over email, professional, used complete sentences, so I said yes. He showed up on October 1st to move in, late afternoon, right around dusk. I was up in my kitchen when I heard a vehicle pull into the driveway. I looked out the window and saw a white van, older model, no windows in the back. The driver's door opened and someone got out. He was tall, very tall, maybe 6'6", thin, almost gaunt, wearing a long canvas work coat, jeans, and a wide-brimmed hat that shadowed his face. He stood by the van for a moment, just looking at the house, not moving, not checking his phone, just looking. Then he walked to the basement entrance on the side of the house. I'd given him the key code for the door lock over email. I heard the door open and close, heard footsteps on the basement stairs, then nothing. I waited for him to come up and introduce himself. That's what every other tenant had done. Quick hello, handshake, thanks for renting to me, basic courtesy, but he didn't come up. After an hour, I went to the basement door and knocked. "John, everything okay down there?" Silence, then a voice, deep and flat. "Yes, thank you. Need anything? I can show you how the thermostat works, where the water shutoff is." "No, thank you." I waited for more, but that was it. Just those 4 words. I went back upstairs feeling oddly dismissed. Over the next few days, I barely heard him. No footsteps, no water running, No TV or music. The only way I knew he was there was his van in the driveway and occasionally seeing the basement door open or close when he came and went, always at odd hours, never during the day, always dusk or later. A week in, my neighbor Patricia came over while I was getting my mail. "Hey Derek, who's your new tenant?" she asked. "Guy named John." "Why? He was in my backyard last night," she said. "Around 2 a.m. I heard something and looked out my bedroom window, and he was just standing there, in the middle of my yard. Not doing anything, just standing." "What did you do?" I asked. "I turned on the porch light." He looked up at the light, then walked back toward your property. Didn't run, didn't seem startled, just calmly walked away. "I'll talk to him," I said. But when I knocked on the basement door that evening, he didn't answer. I could hear him down there, a faint rustling sound, like fabric moving, but no response to my knocking. "John, I need to talk to you about property boundaries," I called through the door. "You can't go in the neighbors' yards at night. It's trespassing." More silence, then that same flat voice. "I understand. My apologies." Another week passed. Now I was hearing him more at night. Not footsteps exactly, more like dragging, something being dragged across the basement floor, heavy and slow. It would go on for hours, from around midnight to 4 or 5 a.m., then silence. I thought maybe he was moving furniture, rearranging, but it happened every night. Same sound, same hours. On October 15th, I was in my kitchen around 1 a.m., couldn't sleep. I heard the basement door open, footsteps going up the exterior stairs to ground level. I went to my window and looked out. John was in my backyard. In the moonlight, I could see him more clearly than I had before. That work coat he always wore hung on him strangely, like it was several sizes too big. The hat completely shadowed where his face should be, and his hands hung at his sides, and the fingers were too long. Even from the second floor, I could see they extended past where fingers should end. He walked to the fence line, stopped, stood perfectly still for several minutes. Then he turned and walked to a different section of fence, stopped again, like he was patrolling the perimeter, checking boundaries. After about 20 minutes, he went back inside. The next morning, Patricia knocked on my door. She looked scared. "He was in my yard again," she said. "But Derek, he wasn't alone. There was something with him, something on all fours." I thought it was a dog at first, but it was too big, and the way it moved. She shook her head. "I'm calling the police if it happens again. I'll deal with it today," I promised. "I'll go down there and talk to him face to face." That afternoon, I went down the basement stairs and knocked on the door. No answer, but I could hear something inside, that dragging sound, and something else, a wet, tearing sound, like fabric ripping, or skin. "John, I'm coming in," I called. I used my master key and opened the door. The apartment was dark, all the curtains drawn, no lights on. It took a moment for my eyes to adjust. When they did, I wished they hadn't. The furniture I'd provided, the bed, the small couch, the table and chairs, had all been pushed against the walls. The center of the room was clear, and on the floor were skins. Animal skins, deer, coyote, what looked like a large dog, all of them laid out flat, stretched, some of them fresh enough that they were still wet. The smell was overwhelming. Blood and meat and something else, something foul. And in the corner, in the bedroom area, something moved. It was John, but it wasn't. He was crouched in the corner, his back to me, still wearing that work coat. But the coat was open now, and I could see his back, his actual back. And it wasn't human. The skin was gray and rough, like tree bark. The spine was too long, too pronounced, the vertebrae visible through the skin like a ridge of stones. And as I watched, frozen in horror, he was doing something with his hands, pulling at his face, peeling something away. He'd been wearing a mask, a human face mask, and he was removing it. The mask came away with a wet sound. He set it carefully on the floor in front of him. Then he turned his head toward me. The thing looking at me wasn't human. The skull was elongated. The eye sockets were too large, too far apart. The mouth was a lipless slit that stretched almost ear to ear, and the eyes were completely black except for a faint yellowish glow deep inside. It spoke in that same flat voice. "You were not supposed to see this." I ran up the stairs, into my house, slammed the door and locked it, grabbed my phone and called 911. "There's something in my basement," I told the operator. "It's not human. It's wearing human skin. You need to send someone now." The operator asked me to stay calm, asked if I was in danger, asked if I was injured. I told her I was locked in my house, but the thing in my basement had a separate entrance. It could leave whenever it wanted. It could be gone before the police arrived. Deputies from La Plata County showed up 20 minutes later, 2 of them. They took my statement, then went down to check the basement apartment. I watched from my kitchen window as they knocked on the basement door, announced themselves, then used the master key I'd given them to go inside. They were down there for maybe 5 minutes. When they came back up, one of them came to my front door. "Mr. Hayes, we checked the apartment," he said. "Nobody's there. And we didn't see any animal skins or blood. Are you sure about what you saw?" "What? Yes, I'm sure. They were right there on the floor." "Can you come down and show us?" I followed them down to the basement apartment. The deputy opened the door and I looked inside. The apartment was completely normal. Furniture in its proper places. No skins on the floor. No blood. No smell. The curtains were open, letting in the late afternoon light. The bed was neatly made. Everything was clean and ordinary. I don't understand," I said. "It was here. An hour ago. All of it was here." The deputies exchanged a glance. "Sir, have you been under a lot of stress lately? Any medications you're taking?" "No, I'm not crazy," I said. "My tenant, John Blackwood, he was here. He was. He had taken off his face. His real face underneath was." "Sir, according to the lease agreement you showed us, your tenant's name is Jake Brennan," the deputy interrupted. "Not John Blackwood, and he paid his first month's rent with a check, not cash. We looked at the copy of his application. Everything seems normal." I stared at him. "What are you talking about?" "His name is John Blackwood. I have the emails. I pulled out my phone to show them the email thread. But when I opened my email app, the conversation wasn't there. Instead, there was a different thread, with someone named Jake Brennan, confirming a move-in date, discussing rent, everything completely normal and professional. This isn't right," I said. "These aren't the emails I remember." "Mr. Hayes, we're going to recommend you follow up with your doctor," the deputy said gently. "Maybe you're working too hard, not getting enough sleep. Stress can make people see things that aren't there." They left. I stood in the basement apartment, trying to process what had just happened. Had I hallucinated the whole thing? Was I losing my mind? Then I noticed something. On the floor in the corner, right where I'd seen that thing crouching, there was a small stain, dark brown, almost hidden against the brown carpet. I bent down and touched it, still damp, still sticky. Blood. I got a towel and wiped it up. The towel came away dark red. This was real. I hadn't imagined it. I went back upstairs and checked my security cameras. I had one covering the driveway in front of the house. I pulled up the footage from October 1st, the day John, or Jake, or whatever it was called itself, had moved in. The footage showed the white van pulling up, the driver's door opening, but when the figure got out, the camera glitched. The image pixelated, broke up into blocks of corrupted data. By the time the picture stabilized, the figure was already at the basement door, mostly out of frame. I couldn't see any details, couldn't see the face or body clearly. Every time the figure appeared on camera after that, the same thing happened. Glitching, pixelation, like something about it disrupted the electronic recording. I spent the next 3 days barely sleeping. Every sound from the basement made me jump. Every time I looked out the window at night, I expected to see that thing in my yard, but I didn't see it. Didn't hear the dragging sounds anymore. Didn't hear anything. On October 20th, I worked up the courage to go down to the basement apartment again. Knocked on the door. No answer. Used my key and went inside. Empty. Completely empty. No furniture pushed against walls. No skins. No blood. But also no tenant belongings. No clothes. No toiletries. No food in the kitchenette. Nothing that suggested anyone lived there. The white van was gone from my driveway. My tenant, whatever he really was, had vanished. I called the phone number from the lease application. Disconnected. I checked the email address. Bounced back. I looked up Jake Brennan, the name on the lease the deputies had seen. No results. No social media. No public records. Like he'd never existed. I contacted my bank to return the 3 months' rent, but when I checked my account, there was no deposit. No record of receiving $1,500 in cash. No record of any rent payment at all. I went to my filing cabinet where I kept the lease paperwork. Found the folder. Opened it. Empty. No signed lease. No application. No copies of ID. Nothing. It was like my tenant had erased himself from reality. From my memory. From my records. From everyone's memory except mine. I called Patricia, my neighbor who'd seen him in her yard. Patricia, do you remember talking to me about my tenant? About seeing him in your yard at night? She was quiet for a moment. Derek, I haven't talked to you about any tenant. You told me the basement apartment was vacant, that you were still looking for someone to rent it. But you said you saw him, multiple times, standing in your yard. I haven't seen anyone, she said slowly. Are you feeling okay? I hung up. Stood in my kitchen trying to understand what was happening. Whatever had been living in my basement, it had somehow changed reality around itself. Changed records, changed memories, changed evidence, made itself disappear while making me look crazy to anyone I told. But I knew what I'd seen. I knew what had been down there, and I had one piece of evidence it couldn't erase. That blood stain I'd wiped up. I still had the towel in a plastic bag in my garage. I took it to a private lab in Farmington, New Mexico, paid out of pocket to have it analyzed. The results came back a week later. The blood was a mixture, mostly deer, some coyote. But there was also DNA that the lab couldn't identify. They said it was similar to human DNA, but with significant anomalies, chromosomal abnormalities that shouldn't be possible. They asked where I'd gotten it, said they wanted to study it further. I told them I'd found it while hunting and never contacted them again. I haven't rented out the basement apartment since. I sealed the separate entrance, put a padlock on the interior door. I don't go down there anymore. Because sometimes at night, I still hear sounds from below, that dragging sound, the wet tearing, and sometimes in the morning, I find scratches on the inside of the locked basement door. Long gouges in the wood, like something with claws is trying to get out. My mortgage is 3 months behind now. I'm going to lose the house, but I don't care. I'm not renting to anyone else. I'm not taking that risk again. Because whatever came to live in my basement, whatever paid me money that ceased to exist and signed a lease that erased itself, it might still be down there, waiting in the dark, wearing whatever face it needs to wear to survive. I'm sharing this because landlords need to know. If someone offers to pay months up front in cash, if they have no rental history, if they only want to communicate by email, if they avoid being seen during the day, to be suspicious, check their references obsessively, meet them in person in a public place before agreeing to anything, watch how they move, watch how their face sits on their skull, because something out there is looking for places to hide. Places where they can practice being human without being watched too closely. Basement apartments, guest houses, anywhere private and separate where they can shed their human costume at night and be what they really are. If you're a landlord and you've had a tenant who disappeared without trace, who left no evidence they ever existed, who made you question your own memory, share your story in the comments. Let other people know what to watch for. Because these things are getting smarter, getting better at hiding in plain sight, getting better at making people doubt what they've seen. And if you currently have a tenant you never see, who makes strange sounds at night, who only comes and goes in darkness, check your basement. Really check it. Look for signs. Look for skins. Look for blood. And if you find anything, don't confront them. Don't go down there alone. Just get out of your house and call the police. Call animal control. Call someone who has weapons and training. Because once they know you've seen them, once they know you can identify what they really are, you become a problem. And problems get solved. I got lucky. The thing in my basement left before it decided I was too much of a threat, but I don't think everyone's that lucky. I think some landlords aren't around anymore to tell their stories. I think some people who rented to the wrong tenant ended up as just another missing person case, another cold file, another unsolved disappearance. Don't be one of them. Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong about a potential tenant, turn them down. No amount of money is worth the risk. No amount of mortgage pressure is worth letting something wear a human face move into your home. Because they're out there. They're looking for places to hide, and they're getting very good at pretending to be us. I drive a school bus for Coconino County in Arizona, and last month one of my regular stops started getting picked up by something that wasn't the student's parent. It looked almost right, almost human, but the kid knew better. My name's Patricia. I'm 52, been driving school buses for 14 years. I love my job. I love the kids. I know every student on my route by name, know their parents, know their schedules. It's a good job for someone like me who wants to feel connected to the community. My route covers the rural areas west of Flagstaff. Long stretches of road through ponderosa pine forest, scattered houses set back from the highway, some dirt driveways that stretch half a mile to reach the actual homes. The kids I pick up in the morning are used to waiting by the road, used to the isolation, used to the forest. One of my stops is for a girl named Sophie Chen, 8 years old, 3rd grade, sweet kid, always has her nose in a book. She lives with her mom about 3 miles down Forest Road 514. Every morning at 7:15, Sophie waits at the end of her driveway where it meets the main road. Every afternoon at 3:45, I drop her off at the same spot. Her mom is usually there waiting, or Sophie walks up the long driveway herself. Normal routine. Been doing it since September. On October 23rd, 2024, something changed. I pulled up to Sophie's stop that afternoon. She was the only student left on the bus. Like usual, she was sitting in her regular seat, 3rd row back on the right side, reading her book. When we stopped, she looked up and saw something that made her face go pale. "Miss Patricia," she said quietly, "that's not my mom." I looked out the door. Standing at the end of the driveway was a woman. She was wearing jeans and a flannel shirt, had dark hair pulled back in a ponytail. She looked like every other parent I'd seen at pickup. She was smiling and waving at the bus. Normal, completely normal. "What do you mean, honey?" I asked Sophie. "That looks like my mom, but it's not her," Sophie said. Her voice was shaking. "Her hands are wrong, and she's standing wrong, and my mom doesn't smile like that." I looked again. The woman was still waving, still smiling, and now that Sophie mentioned it, something did look off about her. The smile was too wide, too fixed, like a photograph of a smile rather than an actual expression. "Maybe she's just tired," I suggested. "Long day at work." "No," Sophie said firmly. "That's not my mom. Please don't make me get off the bus. I've been driving long enough to know that when a kid is genuinely scared, there's usually a reason. They see things adults miss. They trust their instincts in ways we've learned to ignore." "Okay," I said. "Stay here a second." I opened the door and stepped down from the bus. The woman was about 20 feet away, still smiling, still waving. I walked toward her. "Hi, are you Sophie's mom?" I called out. "Yes," she said. Her voice was flat, monotone, not the warm greeting I usually got from parents. "I am here for Sophie. She's not feeling well." I lied. "I think she might need to go to the nurse." Can I take her back to school? The woman's smile didn't change. No, Sophie must come home now. I really think she needs to see the nurse, I insisted. She said her stomach hurts. Sophie is fine. Sophie must come home. The woman started walking toward the bus. That's when I saw what Sophie had seen. The hands. The fingers were too long. Just slightly, but enough to be noticeable. And the walk wasn't right. The legs moved stiffly, like someone who'd recently injured their knees. I backed toward the bus. You know what? I'm going to call the school, just to follow protocol, for liability reasons. No need, the woman said. She was getting closer. 20 feet. 15 feet. Give me Sophie now. I got back on the bus and closed the door. The woman was right outside now, staring up at me through the glass, still smiling that fixed smile. Her eyes were wrong too wide, too unblinking. She pressed her hands against the glass door. Those two long fingers spread wide, and I could see her face more clearly now. The features were almost right, almost like what I'd expect Sophie's mom to look like. But the proportions were slightly off. The nose a bit too flat, the eyes a bit too far apart, like a copy made from a description rather than from seeing the real thing. Patricia, drive, Sophie said from behind me. Drive away now. I put the bus in gear and pulled away. In my mirror, I saw the woman standing in the road, watching us go, not moving, not chasing, just watching, that smile still fixed on her face. I drove straight to the school, called the principal from the bus, explained the situation as calmly as I could, told her I had a student who was afraid to go home, that there was someone at her stop claiming to be her parent, but something wasn't right. Principal Reeves came out to the bus, talked to Sophie. Sophie was crying now, saying that thing wasn't her mom, that her real mom was at work until 5 p.m., that nobody should be at the stop picking her up. We called Sophie's mom at her job. She confirmed she was still at work, confirmed she hadn't sent anyone to pick up Sophie, confirmed she'd be there in 20 minutes. When Sophie's real mom arrived, I watched carefully. The way she moved, the way she smiled, the way she hugged Sophie. It was different. Real. The proportions were right. The fingers were normal length. The expression in her eyes was genuine concern and love. Thank you, she said to me. Thank you for trusting Sophie, for not making her get off that bus. What was that thing? I asked quietly, glancing at Sophie, who was getting water from the school fountain with Principal Reeves. Sophie's mom looked at me seriously. I don't know, but my grandmother, she was Navajo. She told me stories about things that copy people. Things that learn to look like humans but can't get all the details right. She said they're drawn to isolated places, to children who are alone, to places where no one would notice if someone disappeared. Should we call the police? I asked. And tell them what? That something that looks almost human tried to pick up my daughter? They'll think we're crazy. She shook her head. I'm pulling Sophie from that stop. I'll drive her to school myself from now on, and I'm telling every parent in our area to be careful, to really look at the person picking up their kids, to trust their instincts if something feels wrong. That was 3 weeks ago. I've driven my route every day since. Every afternoon when I pass Sophie's old stop, I slow down and look. And 3 times in the past 3 weeks, I've seen that woman, standing at the end of the driveway, wearing different clothes each time, but the same wrong smile, the same 2 long fingers, the same fixed expression. She's waiting for a child who will get off the bus, waiting for a kid who doesn't have Sophie's instincts or Sophie's courage to say no. And here's what really terrifies me. Last week, I saw her at a different stop, 10 miles away from Sophie's place, standing at the end of another long driveway on another isolated road. This time she looked different. Different hair, different build, different clothes, but I recognized her by the details. The fingers, the smile, the way she stood. She was learning, adapting, trying different forms at different stops, seeing which one worked. I reported it to my supervisor, told him I was seeing someone suspicious at multiple stops, He checked with the parents. None of them had seen anyone unusual. None of them had sent anyone to pick up their kids early. "Maybe you're stressed," my supervisor said. "Maybe you need a few days off. But I know what I saw. And I'm not the only driver who's seeing things." Last week at our monthly driver meeting, another driver named Thomas mentioned something strange. He said at one of his rural stops, a man had been appearing in the afternoons, standing at the tree line near the stop, not approaching, just watching. The kids noticed him first, said he looked wrong, said his head was too big for his body. Another driver, Linda, said she'd had a similar experience. Something standing at one of her stops in the morning, wearing a crossing guard vest, but there's no crossing guard assigned to that stop. And when Linda slowed down to ask if she needed help, the figure turned and walked into the woods, not running, just calmly walking into the trees like it had never been there. We're all seeing them now, these almost right people at isolated stops, these things that look human enough from a distance but wrong up close. And the kids know, the kids always know. They get nervous at certain stops. They don't want to get off the bus. They ask us to wait until their real parent arrives. The school district hasn't issued any official warnings. They don't want to cause panic. But unofficially, we drivers have started a protocol. If a kid says something's wrong, if a kid says that's not their parent, we don't make them get off. We call the school. We wait for confirmation. We trust the kid's instincts. Because Sophie was right. Her real mom looks similar to that thing, but there are differences. Small differences that an adult might overlook but a child wouldn't. The way someone holds their hands, the way they tilt their head, the warmth in their eyes versus the emptiness in something that's only mimicking warmth. Yesterday, something happened that made me realize how serious this is. I was at a stop dropping off two kids, brothers ages 6 and 9. Their dad was there to pick them up, normal routine. The boys got off the bus, ran to their dad, hugged him. I watched to make sure they made it safely. As I started to pull away, I glanced in my mirror. The dad was walking toward his truck with the boys, but behind him, at the edge of the driveway where the trees started, another figure stepped out. It looked exactly like the dad, same height, same clothes, same build, but it was watching the real dad and the kids with an intensity that made my skin crawl. I stopped the bus, got on my radio. "Base, I have a situation at the Rodriguez stop. There's an unauthorized person on the property, requesting police response." The second figure turned and looked at my bus, looked directly at me through the mirrors, and then it smiled. That too wide smile, that fixed expression, and it walked backward into the trees. Not turned around and walked backward, like something that didn't understand how humans move when they retreat. The police came, searched the area, found tracks in the soft earth at the tree line, boot prints that started normal and then transitioned into something else, something with claws. The tracks went deep into the national forest and the police didn't follow them any further. Deputy Johnson, who responded to the call, told me off the record that they've had multiple reports in the last month, things watching school bus stops, things appearing at playgrounds, things standing at the edges of parking lots where parents pick up kids from sports practice, always in rural areas, always at isolated locations, always watching children. "The tribal police are taking it more seriously than we are," he admitted. "They've been seeing this pattern for longer. They know what these things are. But the county doesn't want to officially acknowledge it because how do you warn people? How do you tell parents that something's out there trying to copy them to get access to their kids?" "You tell them to pay attention," I said. "You tell them to trust their kids. You tell them that if their child says something's wrong, they're probably right." He nodded. "I'll suggest that. But between you and me, I'm putting my kids in a school that doesn't need buses, somewhere urban where there are lots of people, lots of witnesses. These things work in isolation. They need empty roads and long driveways and parents who are running late. I can't quit my job. I need the money, but I've changed how I operate. Now I have a list of every parent on my route, photos I requested from them, detailed descriptions. If someone I don't recognize shows up at a stop, I don't let the kid off. If someone I do recognize seems even slightly wrong, I call first. Last week I added another protocol. When I drop kids off at isolated stops, I wait. I don't pull away until I see them reach their front door, until I see a parent I recognize wave at me from the door. It adds 15 minutes to my route, my supervisor complained, but I don't care. Because 2 days ago, I waited at the Henderson stop, watched little Amy walk up her long driveway toward her house, and halfway up that driveway, something stepped out of the trees. It looked like her dad. Started walking toward her, and Amy screamed and ran back toward the bus. I opened the door and she jumped on. "That's not my dad," she sobbed. "That's not him." I drove away with Amy still on board. The thing that looked like her dad stood in the middle of the driveway, watching us go, not moving, not reacting, just watching with that fixed smile. We called Amy's real dad. He was at work, had been there all day, had no idea what we were talking about. Now Amy's family is moving, selling their house, leaving the area. They can't stay somewhere their daughter isn't safe walking up her own driveway. I'm sharing this because parents need to know, bus drivers need to know, teachers need to know. If your kid mentions someone at their bus stop who seems wrong, listen to them. If your kid is afraid of someone who looks like you, believe them. Kids know. They can see the differences we miss. And if you're a bus driver, especially if you cover rural routes, watch your stops carefully. Really look at the people picking up kids. Check the fingers. Check the eyes. Check the way they move. And if something feels wrong, don't let that kid off your bus. Call the school. Call the parents. Wait for confirmation. Because these things are getting bolder. They're showing up in daylight now. They're trying multiple stops. They're learning which kids are vulnerable, which kids are alone, which parents are predictable, and which are late. If you've seen something like this, if you've noticed someone at your child's bus stop who seemed almost right but not quite, share your story in the comments. Let other parents and drivers know what to watch for, because these things rely on us dismissing the small wrongness. They rely on us being too polite to question. They rely on us not trusting our instincts. Trust your instincts, trust your kids, and don't let anyone take your child who you haven't personally confirmed is who they say they are. Sophie's safe now, Amy's safe now, but I think about all the rural bus routes in Arizona, in New Mexico, in Colorado, in Utah. All those isolated stops with long driveways and children waiting alone. All those opportunities for something to stand at the tree line. Study the parents, learn to copy them, and wait for the perfect moment. How many kids have gotten off buses into the wrong hands? How many disappeared before anyone noticed something was wrong? How many families lost children to things wearing familiar faces? I don't know, but I know it's happening now, and I know we need to stop trusting that everyone who looks like a parent is actually a parent. Stay vigilant, verify, trust your kids when they say something's wrong, and always wait until you see them reach safety before you drive away, because the 5 minutes you spend waiting might be the 5 minutes that saves their life. I'm a wildlife photographer, and last month I spent 3 nights in a ground blind in Utah photographing elk. On the 3rd night, something else came to the clearing, something that knew I was watching, something that wanted me to see it. My name's Oliver. I'm 35, been doing nature photography professionally for 8 years, mostly large mammals, elk, moose, bears, wolves. I sell prints, do magazine work, occasionally guide photo tours. It's a good life, quiet, solitary, just me and the animals and the wilderness. In late October 2024, I got a tip from a ranger I know about an elk meadow in the Uinta Mountains. Said there was a decent-sized herd moving through at dawn and dusk, said the rut was still active, said I could get some good shots if I was patient. He gave me coordinates to a clearing about 8 miles into the national forest, accessible only by hiking. Perfect. I packed my gear on October 26th. Camera body, long telephoto lens, tripod, camping equipment, ground blind. A ground blind is basically a small camouflage tent with mesh windows that lets you photograph wildlife without being seen or smelled. You set it up in advance, let the animals get used to it, then sit inside for hours waiting for the perfect shot. I hiked in that afternoon, found the clearing exactly where the ranger said it would be. Beautiful spot, maybe 200 yards across, surrounded by aspen and pine, with a small stream running through the northern edge. Fresh elk tracks everywhere, rubs on the trees where bulls had been scraping their antlers. This was definitely an active area. I set up my blind on the eastern edge of the clearing, tucked into a cluster of fallen logs and brush. Good sight lines across the meadow, good cover, good wind direction to keep my scent from carrying into the clearing. I staked it down, arranged the mesh windows, and left it there to let the wildlife accept it as part of the landscape. Then I hiked back about a quarter mile and set up my actual camp, made dinner, hung my food bag away from bears, got into my sleeping bag around 9 p.m. The plan was simple. Wake at 5 a.m., hike to the blind before first light, spend dawn and dusk in position for the next 3 days, and hopefully capture some incredible shots. The first morning went perfectly. I was in the blind by 5:30, set up and ready. At 6:15, just as the light was getting good, a small group of cow elk moved into the clearing to graze. Beautiful shots, soft morning light, mist rising from the stream, the golden aspens in the background, exactly what I'd hoped for. Around 8 a.m. they moved off and I packed up for the day, hiked back to camp, ate breakfast, rested, reviewed my shots on the camera's display, perfect exposures, sharp focus, some of the best elk photos I'd ever taken. That evening I was back in the blind at 4 p.m., waiting for the evening session. Around 5:30, a bull elk appeared, huge, maybe a 6-point. He walked into the clearing alone, bugled once, and started thrashing a small aspen with his antlers. Incredible behavior. I shot probably 300 frames, capturing every moment. He left around 6:45 as the light faded. I waited another 30 minutes to make sure nothing else was coming, then packed up and headed back to camp. Day 1 was a complete success. Day 2 was similar. Morning session brought more cows and calves. Evening session brought 2 smaller bulls sparring. Great shots, great wildlife behavior, everything a photographer could want. On the third night, October 28th, things changed. I was in the blind at 4 p.m. like usual, set up my camera, adjusted the tripod, settled in for the evening wait. The light was perfect. Clear sky, no wind, that golden hour glow that makes everything look magical. At 5:15, movement at the tree line, but it wasn't elk. It was a person. They walked into the clearing from the north side, near the stream. Tall figure, maybe 6.5 feet, wearing what looked like dark clothes or possibly buckskin, too far away to see details clearly, but definitely human-shaped, walking upright on 2 legs. I was annoyed. Another person in my spot meant the elk probably wouldn't come. Wildlife avoid areas where they smell or see humans. This evening's session was probably ruined. The figure walked to the center of the clearing and stopped, just stood there, facing my direction, facing directly at my blind. I froze. The blind was well camouflaged. There's no way they should have known I was there, but they were staring right at my position, not moving, not looking around, just staring. I lowered my camera and watched through the mesh window. Minutes passed. The figure didn't move, didn't shift weight, didn't look away, just stood there in the middle of the clearing, perfectly still, facing my blind. Then it raised one arm and waved, a slow, deliberate wave, like someone greeting a friend they'd spotted across a distance. My heart started pounding. They definitely knew I was here. But how? I hadn't made any noise. My scent was blowing away from them. The blind was designed to be invisible. There's no way they should have spotted me. Unless they'd been watching me set it up. Unless they'd been in the forest this whole time, observing, waiting. I stayed frozen, didn't wave back, didn't make a sound. Just watched through the mesh as the figure stood there with its arm raised. After a full minute, It lowered its arm, then it crouched down, and I realized with growing horror that it was getting on all fours. It moved forward on its hands and knees, crossing the clearing toward my blind, not crawling like a person would crawl, moving like an animal, like a predator stalking prey. The arms were too long for the movement to look right. The back was arched wrong, but it was definitely coming toward me. I grabbed my camera, not to photograph it, to use the telephoto lens to see it more clearly. I pointed the lens through the mesh window and looked through the viewfinder. The figure filled my frame, and through the magnification of my 600mm lens, I could see details I hadn't noticed before. The face was wrong. It had human features, eyes, nose, mouth, but arranged in a way that wasn't quite right. The proportions were off. The skin had a texture that looked more like leather than flesh, and the eyes were reflecting light, glowing faintly in the evening sun like an animal's eyes would glow, like a deer's eyes catching a flashlight beam. It was maybe 60 yards away now, still moving on all fours, still coming directly toward my blind, moving with purpose, moving like it knew exactly where I was. I pulled out my phone. No signal. I'd known there wouldn't be, but I checked anyway out of desperation. The thing was 40 yards away now. I could hear it moving through the grass, a wet, shuffling sound. Not footsteps, something else. I looked through my camera again. It had stopped, was crouched about 30 yards away, perfectly still, staring at my blind, and now I could see its mouth. It was open, too wide. The jaw hinged too far, and I could see teeth, too many teeth, sharp and irregular like broken glass. Then it spoke. I know you are there. The voice was flat, toneless, each word carefully pronounced. I can smell your fear. I didn't respond, didn't move. My hand was shaking so badly I could barely hold the camera steady. You have been watching me for 3 days, it continued. Now I will watch you. That wasn't true. I'd been watching elk. I'd been in this blind photographing wildlife, unless it had been here the whole time, in the forest, watching me, and I'd been so focused on the elk I'd never noticed. The thing started moving again, circling around my blind, moving through the brush at the edge of the clearing. I could track its position by the sound, branches breaking, leaves rustling, that wet shuffling sound. It completed a full circle and stopped back where it had started, 30 yards away in the open meadow. Then it stood up on 2 legs. Now I could see its full height. It was at least 7 feet tall. The body was wrong, too thin, too elongated, joints that bent at angles that weren't human. The arms hung past its knees, and the head was too small for the body. Or maybe it wasn't a head at all. Maybe it was something else attached to the neck that only looked like a head from a distance. You take pictures, it said. Take a picture of me. I didn't move. Take a picture. Each word deliberate, demanding. My finger was on the shutter button. I pressed it. The camera fired. 1 shot. The autofocus locked on. The shutter clicked. The image captured. The thing tilted its head. Again. I took another shot, then another. My hands were shaking, but the image stabilization in the lens was doing its job. The shots would be sharp, clear, proof of what I was seeing. Good, it said. Now you will leave. You will take your pictures. You will show people. You will tell them what you saw. And more will come. More photographers. More watchers. More prey. It wanted me to bring others here. It was using me as bait. I'm not leaving yet, I said, surprising myself with my own voice. My permit is for 3 more days. The thing's mouth opened wider. That too wide jaw. Those too many teeth. Then I will wait with you. We will watch the elk together. And when you sleep tonight, I will visit your camp. It turned and walked back into the forest. Not on all fours this time, walking upright like a person. But with that wrong gait, those 2 long strides, it disappeared into the trees. I sat in the blind for another 20 minutes, not moving, barely breathing. Then I packed up my gear as quickly and quietly as I could, left the blind standing, just grabbed my camera bag and started hiking back to my camp. The sun was setting. I had maybe 40 minutes of light left. My camp was a quarter-mile away. I could make it if I moved fast. I was halfway there when I heard it behind me, that wet, shuffling sound, following me, staying just out of sight in the trees, keeping pace with me. I walked faster, not quite running. Running would trigger a chase response. I'd read enough about predator behavior to know that, but I walked as fast as I could while still seeming calm. The sound stayed with me, sometimes to my left, sometimes to my right, always in the trees, always just beyond where I could see clearly in the fading light. I reached my camp just as the last light was dying. My tent was undisturbed. My food bag was still hanging in the tree. Everything was exactly as I'd left it. I got into my tent and zipped it closed, grabbed my headlamp and my knife, sat in the corner farthest from the door and waited. Around 8 p.m., I heard it circling my tent, the same shuffling sound, moving around the perimeter, stopping occasionally. I could hear breathing, wet and ragged, like something that had to remember how to breathe. "I can hear your heart," the voice said from right outside my tent, maybe 2 feet away. "It beats like prey." I didn't respond. "You should have left when I told you to leave. Now you are trapped here with me until morning." The night was the longest of my life. The thing circled my tent for hours, sometimes walking, sometimes on all fours, sometimes making sounds that weren't words, just clicking and hissing and wet noises that made my skin crawl. Around 3 a.m., it started scratching on the tent fabric, long dragging sounds, testing the material, seeing if it could get through. I held my knife ready. If it came through the tent, I'd fight. I'd probably lose, but I'd fight. But it didn't come through, just scratched and circled and made those terrible sounds until the sky started to lighten around 5 a.m. Then silence. I waited until full daylight at 6:30 before unzipping my tent, looked outside carefully. The clearing where my camp was located appeared empty, but there were marks everywhere. Deep gouges in the trees around my campsite, scratches in the dirt, and right outside my tent door, pressed into the soft earth, was a footprint. It wasn't a human footprint, or an animal footprint. It was something in between, elongated, 5 toes with claws, easily 14 inches long. I packed my gear in 10 minutes, left the tent standing, left the food bag hanging, just grabbed my camera, my essentials, and started hiking toward the trailhead. It was 8 miles. I could make it by noon if I moved fast. I heard it following me for the first 3 miles, that shuffling sound in the trees, always parallel to the trail, never showing itself in daylight, but always there. At mile 4, the sound stopped. I kept hiking, didn't look back, didn't slow down, just focused on getting out. I reached my truck at 11:45 a.m., threw my gear in the back, got in and locked the doors, sat there for a few minutes, just breathing, trying to process what had happened. Then I pulled out my camera and reviewed the images, the shots from the last evening, the thing in the clearing. The photos were there, clear and sharp, the figure standing in the meadow, the wrong proportions, the 2 long arms, the face that wasn't quite right, every detail captured in perfect focus. I drove straight to the ranger station, showed the photos to Ranger Williams, the guy who'd given me the coordinates. He looked at them for a long time without speaking. "This is from the elk meadow I sent you to," he said quietly. "Yeah, I need to report this," he said. He called another ranger, a woman named Hayes. She came and looked at the photos too. They had a whispered conversation I couldn't quite hear. Then Hayes turned to me. "Mr. Chen, I need you to understand something," she said. "We're going to take copies of these photos. We're going to file a report. But officially, we're going to say you saw a bear or a person in a costume, because if we report what these photos actually show, we'll have to close that entire area, and we can't explain to the public why we're closing it without causing panic." "What is it?" I asked. She didn't answer directly. How many people know those coordinates? Just me, and you two. Good. Keep it that way. Don't post these photos online. Don't tell other photographers about this location. Because if you do," she looked at me seriously, "it said it wanted you to bring more people, right? It wants prey. Don't help it." I drove home to Salt Lake City that afternoon. I haven't been back to the Uinta Mountains since. I haven't posted the photos anywhere. I keep them on an encrypted drive as evidence, but I haven't shared them. But I think about what that thing said, about how it had been watching me for 3 days, about how it wanted me to bring others, and I wonder how many other places like that elk meadow exist. How many other clearings have something living nearby that studies the patterns of photographers and hikers and hunters, something that waits for the right moment to reveal itself, something that uses us as bait to lure others. I'm sharing this because photographers need to know. If you're working in remote areas, if you're setting up blinds or trail cameras, or spending days alone in the wilderness, pay attention to the signs. If wildlife suddenly stops coming to an area that was active before, there's a reason. If you feel watched beyond the normal awareness of being in nature, trust that feeling. If you hear something moving in ways that don't match any animal you know, don't investigate. And if something approaches your blind or your camp and speaks to you in a voice that sounds almost human but not quite, pack up immediately. Don't wait for better light. Don't try to get more shots. Just leave, because that thing is testing you, seeing if you'll stay, seeing if you'll bring others. If you're a wildlife photographer and you've had experiences like this, if you've seen things in your blinds that you can't explain, if you've felt that wrongness in places that should be safe, share your story in the comments. Let other photographers know what's out there. Because we work alone in isolated places, and we're vulnerable in ways that other outdoor recreationists aren't. We sit still for hours. We make ourselves invisible. We train ourselves to be patient and quiet. And something has learned to exploit that. Stay alert. Trust your instincts. And if something invites you to take its picture, remember that you might be the one being hunted.